Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this workshop. Working through the national directions package put out by the government to inform our submission to the package. This is the second workshop we've had. We've covered the first portion of it on freshwater last week, and now we've got infrastructure and farming provisions to go through. We have an apology from Alan Somerville, who's currently on Stewart Island, and also an apology from Chair Gretchen Robertson, who's currently travelling and hopes to come in via Zoom at some stage if she gets a minute. Also, I'd like to welcome on teams there, we've got Councillor Forbes and Councillor Metham. So welcome, councillors. Welcome to everybody in the chambers.
Andrew's just coming.
And apparently Andrew Noon's just about to walk in the door. So that's all good. So I think without further ado, I think we'll just hand straight over to her and just start off where we left off last week. Thank you. Fur.
Mute Alexa.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm actually going to attempt to talk you through the NPS for infrastructure. I was going to leave this and then I handed it over to Lauren, who now is unavailable, so it's come back to me. So Tom is going to prop me up as needed for this one. I'll pass this back to Tom. So if we go our first slide. Next slide, Larry. So this is, as we said a few weeks ago, one of the new NPSs. So the purpose of this is to provide better recognition of the benefits of infrastructure and the role that infrastructure plays in supporting all of the things that we do. The government considers that the current system doesn't provide adequately for infrastructure, and it doesn't have a consistent approach for infrastructure across the country. So the proposal is some new definitions and direction on infrastructure activities and supporting activities, which, as we mentioned last time, includes quarrying and then functional and operational needs. There are a couple of, I'm not entirely sure how you did this last week. There are a couple of things, for example, the definition of infrastructure under the NPSI is broader than under the RMA. And the proposed NPS infrastructure is intended to apply to all facets of infrastructure, so operation, maintenance, renewal, upgrade of existing, and to the development of new infrastructure, as well as activities that interface with infrastructure, such as wastewater treatment plants. There's a requirement to consider some planning documents. So one of the goals of this NPS is to be more connected with land use planning, so to have that bigger picture view, to know ahead of time what things are going to look like and where we're going to go. And some national requirements for engaging with Māori. The scope is broad, so energy, three waters, transport, social infrastructure, so hospitals, emergency services, education, defence, corrections, parks, resource recovery, waste disposal, and green infrastructure that delivers flood management services. So there's quite a lot in the scope. So what we can go through the slides and then go back to the proposal. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So that's helpful. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, do sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Drew's just teaching me how to do a workshop. So I'm a bit rusty. So our preliminary response. So generally, the policy position that you landed with the regional policy statement is consistent with the direction in the NPSI. those definitions we think are useful. But there are more complexities when you're applying them to existing infrastructure as opposed to new. So obviously when you're designing new infrastructure and undertaking that spatial planning, you can do that with the definitions in mind. But when things are in place and where they've been, it can be more challenging. There's a gap in terms of river management, what that does. Not entirely sure. It does talk about flood management. On that one.
I think this point is that it doesn't provide like a leg up for public benefit, so it's any benefit, yeah. So the staff view is that we should consider whether activities with a public benefit should be have additional.
We think that the nationally consistent policy framework is useful and can support reducing inefficiencies and consenting costs. This is one of the things that in every RPS I've been involved in, Transpower come in and they have such a challenge because they have different, sets of guidance and policy direction all across the country. And so having an MPS for I for things like, that really critical infrastructure will be really important. But the analysis that we've done is that link between infrastructure and the MPS natural hazards is not as clear as it could or should be. And so some of that is about managing and avoiding adverse effects and how you negotiate, probably functional and operational needs and locational needs with activities that are in areas that may have natural hazards.
Yep, so we just stop.
No,
We just
I'll keep going.
No, sorry.
no, we'll just stop there and
Right
have some
there.
questions
Sorry, I
as
thought
our
we had
process.
that.
Yeah. So Kevin's got a question and then Kate.
Just on 38 new definitions, where you say it will be more complex. So I'm just wondering if you could give me an example of that, because it may actually make things easier. Functional needs are useful, though it will be complex if those needs are applied to existing infrastructure.
Do you mean?
An example of a type of infrastructure.
Well, yeah, how would it become more
Yeah.
complex? So I'm just sort of struggling to see. Because if that's our feedback, one of the things we said right at the start is whatever we do here needs to make things simple and not complex. So if we're saying that it could become complex, how do we give them some direction where we would take that complexity away?
I'm not sure if I've got an example, but I think the point that was being made there was that under the kind of the current regime, the operational needs would have been taken into account. No, the other way around, isn't it? The functional needs would have been taken into account because there's a pathway through, but there wouldn't have been at the time for the operational needs. And so if you're applying that to the existing infrastructure that considered functional but not operations.
The port case was a case similar to that. Because it was about replacing the stuff into the harbour, wasn't it? The lights. It was functional.
Yeah, I think so. And so the want to say something?
So I'm sorry to,
No, I think
it's a really good
if we're going to
point.
put a submission in,
No,
We
don't
need to
apologise.
Sorry to butt in, but that was my question. What the port case was an example of this, and that would get it through, that we wouldn't have had the port taking us up.
Yeah, and I think it's a theme that is recurring throughout a whole lot of changes to various instruments, is that they basically widened the gateways for certain activities, including infrastructure, by broadening functional need to being functional and operational need. It means that you can take in additional considerations like cost and time, operational and logistical needs, rather than an activity only being able to occur there because of the presence of the natural resources that provide for it. So I think, yeah,
So,
it comes down to a totally different assessment.
yeah, so what are we actually saying there that we need direction on how to apply to existing infrastructure? As opposed to saying it's complex, if you're not, it's,
Yeah, I actually think we need to go away and shore that point up, because I actually think the challenges around extending or renewing existing infrastructure.
Yeah.
And it introduces less considerations potentially than you would have had to go through previously.
Yeah.
So it provides a slightly easier gateway through
and is
as
that
opposed to
appropriate?
new infrastructure, and is it appropriate?
Yeah.
So I think rather than complex, it maybe the word is different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to go away and have a look at that.
And further, and just 2 bullet points down, establishes, so you're saying would be established nationally consistent framework. Right, so that's good. So if we have a national definition of significant infrastructure, will that extend, was the aim of that to extend to nationally defined how we define regionally significant infrastructure, because they'll be different in all areas. Just
Almost
didn't quite.
Doesn't do that.
Removing the need for having.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we're just saying is we don't know if you'll need it now because this definition exists.
Yeah, it covers everything.
Yeah. It covers all the major, so our regionally significant infrastructure is our state highways and our hospitals and our some of our airports, not the smaller airstrips and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, your power and telecommunications, all of those big things, wastewater, all of that's
Irrigation schemes,
uh
stockwater schemes.
I was going to say there's one outstanding RPS appeal on exactly that matter at the moment, so we can't comment on that.
No, I'm just asking, is it in the list? That's all. So I'm not asking.
Is it in
I
this
don't think
list?
so.
No.
I don't think it is, no. It's the definition of infrastructure under the new NPS is the same as what's in the RMA, plus additional infrastructure, which is schools, hospitals, fire and emergency services, defense facilities, correction facilities, stormwater, and district or regional resource recovery or waste disposal facilities.
Right, so therefore, if that's not, how do we get irrigation infrastructure added to being regionally significant?
The definition of infrastructure in the RMA
Yeah.
includes, where did it go?
It does, doesn't it?
It does, it includes irrigation. Hang on, I'll just look at it and I'll just list it.
Should have written down the page.
Oh, yeah, a water supply distribution system, including a system for irrigation.
Yeah.
So it's squarely in there.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Mine's sort of along the same line, and so in the RPS, we talk about regionally and nationally significant, I think. To follow on that question is, if it's just for one person, does that still considered as an infrastructure in that definition? It is, great. And then the other part is there a definition in the new one about regionally or nationally significant, or is it just all infrastructure and doesn't have a different weight?
Yeah, so what what this NPS does is it defines infrastructure based on the RMA, and then includes additional infrastructure, and the additional infrastructure is the list that Tom just mentioned. So all of that is considered infrastructure. It's not called nationally significant or
Yeah, so-
regionally significant. It's just infrastructure.
But we talk about, and so it doesn't preclude the council deciding to have to differentiate between regionally and nationally significant, because it's still consistent discussion on infrastructure, it's what the bearing would be on the RPS, because as long as it's consistent, fine, but if it's not, it's just understanding what that.
Yeah, so at the moment, the planning standards don't allow you to define things differently than they're defined in the planning standards. So it's going to depend on whether we're allowed to have a subset of. And we're just having a look. I'm not sure if it's set out in here, but that would be, I think, a submission point that there may be some things
Yeah.
in addition to that that we'd want to define as regionally significant or other infrastructure subject to the NPSI or whatever it is.
It would be very hard for some of those social infrastructure to be at best regional. I mean, I'd love having schools, don't get me wrong, but they're locally significant, they're not regionally significant.
Yeah. So they don't have to be significant to be infrastructure
Yeah.
and get the benefit of the
Yeah,
NPS.
that's,
Yeah.
Is
that's
the,
what sounds
is the
different,
key.
isn't it?
Yep.
So
As opposed
just,
to
just,
the
just
other.
checking about what, yeah, that isn't great, and why we have done it, and why that is a good thing to do, or not.
So, and the reason we've got nationally and regionally significant infrastructure is to create a slightly easier pathway through for those things. This says actually all infrastructure is a good thing.
Yeah.
All within the list. And therefore that sort of negates the need to have that. That's not to say that there might not be other things outside of the list that you do still want to create a preferential pathway through. And that's the difference between the two. And the reason we have done that in the RPS is because that pathway didn't exist. There wasn't that support from a national policy statement.
And then Andrew?
I was just going to ask around what you were saying earlier around the public benefits. Have they sort of taken equalized benefits so that public benefit isn't necessarily held to a higher regard than private benefit?
So what it says is the benefit. So the proposed NPS requires decision makers to recognise and provide for the benefits of infrastructure. And the full benefits, which cover the well-being of future generations, well-functioning urban and rural environments, including sufficient development capacity, supporting development and growth, protecting the natural environment, mitigating effects of climate change, and resilience to natural hazards. So definitely what we do is in there. I guess the point we were making is it doesn't make it any easier for us when we've got statutory obligations to do particular things as opposed to someone else. And so it's whether or not I don't know if you remember, we discussed this at length in the draft plan about making sure councils, we had a pathway through for some of the stuff that we have to do.
Yep.
Our work will be considered the same as everyone else's. There is absolutely support to justify it, but it's whether you want, some recognition of our statutory obligations that there are things that we have to do. Or whether you think that there's enough in that benefits package for us to rely on when we're doing our work.
Thanks, Andrew.
Is the energy generation aspect of this policy statement, is that included, or is that falls under the REG?
So it includes energy except REG and electricity transmission and distribution, which is covered under the others. Yeah.
I think we're reasonably happy with where it's all landed there. But
So we will just explore
Couple of
that
good
second
points.
point a bit more and be really clear what we mean so that you can be clear what you may or may not want to say.
I just wrote down, make sure the submission's defendable, or you can justify the submission if you're going to use words like complex or whatever. Yeah. That sounds good. We can move on to, sorry.
So I'm just, I'm interested about infrastructure. I'm just trying to think the what ifs and I'm a bit slow. When you talk about flood protection, what about things like sediment traps, or those are just something else at scale, or detain ponds? Again, you've talked, it touches on the same sort of things, but not really.
I mean, it talks about things affected by infrastructure. But it doesn't go to that level, so I don't know whether there's a scale, you know, if something
Yeah.
was big enough, then it would be captured, but individually, they wouldn't fall.
But the
Well,
sediment
then I
trap,
don't think-
yeah, isn't seen as infrastructure per se because it's not providing a service other than to the water. Yeah,
I mean, included in the definition of infrastructure is a drainage or sewage system, and a drainage system, you could argue, like it wouldn't be working. I don't know, that's just I mean, I don't know if you could argue that, but
yeah.
I'm
okay.
wondering if you can.
Yeah, no,
Probably
that's fine.
better.
It's splitting hairs to a certain extent and it
Sure.
probably is provided elsewhere, but it's,
I just think if it's getting down to that granular level of things
Yeah.
in the ground, then everything's gonna be subject to it, and
Yeah.
there's gonna be no differentiation. My view is that's not the intent, it's our big
Yeah.
bulk
Yeah.
stuff.
or distributed.
Probably worth thinking about is as it relates to the goal of the infrastructure. So
Yeah.
what the team flagged up here was the sediment trap that related to stormwater. Because it's a stormwater network, the purpose is stormwater infrastructure. But if it were a sediment trap relating to river management, as the team have flagged up here, probably not covered as infrastructure. So it'd be worthwhile working through that context.
If it is a sediment trap for dealing with runoff, and you think it would be good to make a submission point on that, we could probably lump it onto like edge of fields. I think in the previous package that we discussed, there was part of the proposal was to provide for edge of field mitigations. And so we could build that in under that kind of concept as something that could be enabled, I guess, by a national standard or national direction.
Look, I've heard that the more you know, the more you get frustrated that people put things into little cubby holes, and if it goes into 2 cubby holes, it doesn't fit any cubby hole, and it's really frustrating. So I just want to make sure that we're covering it off and it's enabled. Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going.
Can I just go back to, I think that actually is really important. If we just go back to Te Hakapupu and the work that they're trying to do with forestry and everything, encouraging them to get sediment traps in to fix big problems that we've got. That's the sort of stuff that when we do all this, we don't want to end up with, there's a thing we've missed. It's such a fundamental part of them doing really good work. Hopefully it is covered. We just, yes, that would be quite good.
It may not be infrastructure, that's the thing.
I genuinely don't think that's the intent of
Yeah,
this, and I think if we're going
Yeah.
to that scale, that's not to say that we shouldn't, in the other packages,
Yeah.
the MP's fresh water, make sure that there's provision for those
Yeah, cool.
communities
Yeah,
scale water quality mitigation,
Yeah.
like sediment traps.
Cool. Thank you.
That's what I was gonna say, because there's, around your wetlands and freshwater, management stuff. But also when we're getting to that level, that's gonna come to the next level of consultation, I would imagine. Yeah, where this is more direction rather than actual line by line stuff.
And I was just trying to think of an example of if we're including sediment traps, what else it might capture, but I can't. But I think there'd be lots of things that bus stops are infrastructure. So it's not a good example. But there would be some, and so I think it's just, I think scale is the point that you make, Kate, scale is really important in terms of this stuff. Okay. So the next one is the NPS for renewable. So the objective has been updated to have an emissions reductions target as well, or an outcome. Greater resilience and provide for well-beings. Still doesn't include allocation, that's a separate topic. So it's the infrastructure and the built form for this. And so it's a similar consideration to the NPSI in terms of that operational and functional needs, even in sensitive environments. So obviously, you know, REG activities are limited to where the thing that generates the electricity is. And so that requirement is,
Nita, could you turn your,
that requirement has been included. Apologies.
So there's no limitation on that, but sorry, you're still going on scale again, because wind turbines would be covered by that, and yeah, so they are quite interesting beasts as in when they come to submissions. And the scale by quantum or by the height of the turbines would be, it's not, it doesn't speak to that, does it?
I don't know if the definition of,
I'll look up the read.
It's solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, biomass, tidal, wave, and ocean current
it
sources.
certainly includes that in terms of the type, but I don't know if there's anything in terms of
Scale.
No.
the scale again. No,
No, it does differentiate for about between small scale renewable energy generation
Oh, it
and
does.
larger
in
scale.
community scale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is some policy direction on small scale renewable energy direction, yeah. Which is defined as for on-site use.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
And-
It makes a big difference, but
Yeah.
when you're thinking about slope down,
or down,
yeah, slope down and the Hinarangi one. Yes. On sites.
So we just, sorry, I'm just telling Fleur that I don't quite understand the staff responses on this one, so I'm gonna see if Tom can jump in.
It's basically comes down to the fact that the new objective essentially restates part 2 of the Act, section 5. And what we would like is a little bit more guidance as opposed to managing the effects. To what extent should different effects be managed under different circumstances? When do you want to avoid? When do you allow for mitigation? And the same with social and economic and environmental considerations. They're all given the same weight within the objective, which makes it really hard to kind of get a steer of which should take priority over which.
I think that makes a whole lot of sense. I was also just wondering, within one of the benefits or risk, you know, if you look at environmental, is there guidance to how you weigh up the emissions reductions impact versus a potential impact on the environment that that infrastructure is
Yeah.
being built in, and that kind of weighting?
Yeah.
So the draft in terms of existing REG talks about, so 2 policies. One is to ensure decision makers enable the continued operation and maintenance. And then if you're reconsenting, upgrading or repowered, to have regard to the efficiencies and benefit of increasing within the same or similar footprint. Only to consider the additional or different effects and provide flexibility for their upgrades. So it really is about the focus is on acknowledging that once we've got it, we might as well maximise the benefit of it. And you know, and having more in the same space is better than having them spread around. So it doesn't specifically do that, but there is the policy direction to say if we've already got it, let's make the most of and things like only considering the additional effects. Whereas at the moment, if you reconsent something, you consider it as if it's not there at all.
Yeah.
So that is a different policy approach.
I'm nervous about the word avoid. However, just going back to the previous slide, when it talks about requires consideration of operational and functional needs and rig activities, even in sensitive environments. So definition of a sensitive environment, very much I imagine a case by case. There is really no feeling but a ring around what a sensitive environment is. That's what that makes that. So the last bullet point I'm talking about. So that sort of flows through to the further guidance around the balancing of the four well-beings. Obviously, as a shift from having environmental effects sitting up at a higher level. And of course, that was part of the problem. Nothing could be considered. And I could give examples, but I won't. But nothing could be considered because of the Mana o Te Wai. So what I'm trying to say is that second bullet point, identify where adverse effects are to be avoided, remedied or mitigated. Yeah, I'm sure there would be occasions where they need to be avoided, but the issue with the word avoided makes it available pretty much for every proposal. So that I'm just nervous about, I'm not asking you to change it, but I'm just expressing my view. It's been part of the problem because if it wasn't consistent with Te Mana o Te Wai, which is, fresh water objective focus, it basically got kicked for touch. And I'm probably talking about hydro, in particular, small hydro schemes. Because I think the whole purpose of this is to try and ensure that it's more enabling. And as Elliot has just said, it's about sustainability or resilience and other reasons to have a slightly more enabling policy. Anyway, that was a bit of a waffle, but I'm just nervous about that.
I think we want to jump in and answer. So at the moment, the direction is enabling REG as long as the effects are avoided, remedied, or mitigated. So that's the general package. So it's not asking you to avoid as an absolute. It's saying work through the package.
Okay.
And what you often see now with the package is avoid, remedy, mitigate, offset, or compensate. It's only got those three, and we're practicable. So it's not in it at all costs.
Yeah, the word is where practicals in there.
And so it's saying as a package, if you put your pylon here versus here, one might be better than the other. If you avoid that spot, that wetland and put it there, you can still do it. But it's not an avoid at all costs. It's an absolute package, and we're practicable. So it's got a couple of abilities just to manage them.
That was good, thank you.
So we need to include the where practical in our
Just in terms of what our submission point would be, what we are proposing was that we'd like some further directional guidance on when adverse effects should be avoided or should be remedied or mitigated, rather than at the moment it's left for the decision maker to make that weighing up. But if there could be better guidance or direction on when things should be avoided, then that should help deal with the issue that you're raising, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've got Kate and Tim.
Tim's more informed than me on that.
Tim, Tim, we'll go to you. Phil, we'll go to you now, thanks.
Kate, I wouldn't say that, but yes, I do have a personal view on renewable energy, obviously. And some of the issues that we've had in the past are around height restrictions for small scale wind turbines. And I'm just wondering, Tom, you were mentioning before that there was some sort of definition between small scale and I guess large scale. So I really would be interested in understanding what the definition would be for small scale wind, and if there's any kind of height restriction which requires, or a height level that requires resource consent. I hope I'm not sort of upsetting the conversation that sort of had flowed on from there. But,
No, to my knowledge, the current NPS renewable energy generation and the proposed amendments don't go to that kind of level of detail.
Mm.
So they don't set height restrictions, or design standards per se.
That they combine small and community to one scale, as opposed to, they used to differentiate it, which makes sense, so you can do off-site
Yeah.
sales.
Mm. Mm.
It's a much better definition, combining them.
Yeah, so just for clarity, the small scale REG is renewable electricity generation where the primary purpose is to provide electricity for on-site use at an individual site or landholder level, and then community is primary purpose of supplying electricity to our community. So they were grouped and now they're separated out, so it does, differentiate.
There are other uses as well, and we're seeing quite a few applications going in communication towers and things like that as well. So would that fit in within the community use? Is that what you're saying? There?
So it will depend on the primary purpose. So this says REG with the primary purpose of, and then either individually or community supply. So that's the current definition at the moment.
What you just mentioned about communication towers is actually subject to a package that we'll talk about later.
Okay. Yep.
And
Okay.
that set like height restrictions, etc. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
That's, so, okay, you,
Yeah, so I've got two issues, sorry. I've got the proposed provisions on page 2 of their document says amend and rename definition of small and community scale distributed generation just to community scale. So I think that's moving that way to one definition instead of 2. But I could have,
Wow.
that's under the community scale reg on page 2 of their proposed provisions, but that's how I'd read it. Anyway, the question I've got is, I think this stuff is all really, really nice, but actually there's a higher level issue, and I know it's probably not within scope, but I think we need to push them, is that understanding the distributed network and the capacity for more of this. I think the stuff is absolutely brilliant, but the transmission network is opaque. You can't see where there is potential to add to it anyway. And to get that knowledge is exceedingly expensive because every network line will charge you heaps for it. So I think I like where this is going. It's really, really sensible, but there's a bigger piece that we have to encourage the government to make the distributed, the transmission network more obvious where there is capacity available on the lines. It is, so yeah, you just can't get that easily. If you're looking at the roading network, you know where the roads are plugged up. You can't see that on the transmission.
I was just suggesting that there potentially is an opportunity in our regional spatial plan to do that if you're doing it with the infrastructure providers to enable that mechanism to bring that forward.
Yeah, I can tell, having looked at it, it is really, really hard. I think the transmission is hard enough as opposed to the auroras and the power nets and everything. So, because this is exactly what we do need, and I really want to support making it easier. There was one other point, but I'll come back to it if I think about it. Oh, sorry. The other one is encouraging, really good to encourage a dual. So the Mahinarangi wind turbines used to work really well with the lake. So where you've got two complementary systems that can be used as banks, it's really good to get that sort of stuff and to think in that way when you're providing for those things. Because if it's windy, it's not, those things that work together well. Gives resilience. Yeah, resilience actually should be in there. It's not just a distributed. Should be writing from that.
And just having a look, with the existing REG, it does talk about allowing upgrades for new technologies and to improve resilience. So that's definitely in there for the existing stuff, and should be picked up in the in the new, but that's the specific policy to enable the existing stuff. And it does talk about the objective is to provide greater resilience to disruptions in electricity supply. So that's in the main objective.
Yeah, so having complementary, if you've already got existing capacity, yeah.
Are you doing this one?
No. Oh, I know.
So we've got a couple of notes on that one?
Yeah.
Awesome. So go on to the networks.
Yep, so this is the, is the MPS on electricity transmission. It's going to be broadened to electricity networks, and it includes some smaller scale stuff. So this is the one that talks about EV networks and things like that. So the renaming is pretty minor, doesn't have is not particularly impactful, but it does introduce new policies to support optimal route selection.
Well, what do they have to consider when they do that? That would be the only thing. I think it's probably the best thing, they're the key ones to do it, but then if Tom's has built a new house right in line of it and his good lawn becomes where the power pole is, like actually how would that be determined?
So it says the proposed policy requires decision makers have regard to how much adverse effects have been managed through route selection. And acknowledging some effects are unavoidable.
Scotland, they're doing a lot of work in this place and it's just anywhere.
Yeah.
It's having a huge, huge effect in Scotland.
Yeah.
With the networks,
Hmm?
with the poles, with the network.
Well, places like that have, understanding because of Ukraine getting off other systems of gas and things. And so you can see it being rolled out really quickly. England and Scotland at the moment, and it's literally anywhere.
And so it talks about strengthening the requirements in this MPS for decision makers to recognise and provide for these networks that have a functional or operational need, including in areas with some Section 6 values. That goes back to your earlier point, Andrew, about sensitive environments, and with unavoidable adverse effects on the environment. So it says that these need to go where they need to go, and there will be impacts of them, and we need to still enable them.
And they come with people not being able to build or develop as well underneath. Often.
Generally, there's a quite a wide buffer in terms of where you can't build or dig or can't go up or down generally.
Is it worthwhile promoting the idea to encourage the network operators to clearly indicate well in advance, i.e. us will go through a designation type process well in advance, so that then any plan change to or change of use, land use for that land is signalled earlier on to ensure that it minimises exactly the things that
Tom's new house right beside where the
Yeah,
pylons
the
go.
top, yeah, the top house, yes.
Yeah.
Because ideally, these sorts of, I suppose, changes to the networks, they don't happen overnight. They happen well in advance. They'll be thinking about, the next decade plus, but to have that signalled in a district plan well in advance, beneficial to all.
Yep. So that
I think
picks
that's
up point
number
3, which is the spatial planning.
I should have gone to the next page.
That's right. That was my fault. I didn't take it there quickly enough. So that's exactly the point, is that you do that big picture thinking and
Should that be
as far as possible.
Should that be should? I think we should be saying it should, as in
Yeah,
it should be
Good, yep.
um,
Good thinking.
engagement to get to that point quickly.
I think it is. It is an effective tool. It's used strategically.
Sorry, I suppose what I was trying to say is they should be using it. Yeah, stronger language that they have to be involved. That
Will
can-
be.
Yeah. we will be.
I read that, and then the next bullet point actually gives you the answer how to proceed. Anyway, I thought
I think
It does, but it doesn't say that they have to do it 5 years beforehand or 10 years
No,
beforehand.
no, that's right, yeah.
Mm.
Which,
And I think that's the thing, is that the operators will still decide where it needs to go, but if you can tell someone 10 years in advance.
Yeah.
Then you can have different conversations at a district plan.
Yeah.
Level. The challenge, so this will be really important when when the new RM legislation comes out, is making sure that this sort of stuff is picked up and carried through, the importance of spatial planning. And I actually was also just wondering, I don't know what's in the national infrastructure plan in terms of what direction that provides for doing some of this stuff, you know.
So I think what I'm taking out of all that is to strengthen up that course, that third bullet point.
Yep.
Yeah. Any other comments?
Yep.
Seems to me that's exactly the reason why we do spatial planning, so that there is a plan, and it's not just ad hoc. Electricity,
Got it.
Cool. I'll take over now. I'll try to do my best, like Anita said. Basically, Warren was gonna do this, so we're coming in a little bit.
We're a bit fast.
Fresh, yeah. But anyway, the next one is changes to an existing national environmental standard. But it's being renamed. So that's the National Environmental Standard for Electricity Transmission. For electricity transmission activities, and it's been renamed to National Environmental Standard for Electricity Network Activities. It's also being expanded to cover electricity distribution and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. That one has probably a direct impact on some of the activities that we're undertaking and managing, because what it does is creating a set of new permitted activity rules for activities proposed by those network providers that are under our plan, often require a consent or managed to some degree. Some of those activities become permitted, but there are also some that are currently in that NES restricted discretionary, and that they're proposing to provide a more lenient consenting pathway, so they would become controlled, which means that it would be hard to kind of manage those effects under our plans. That is particularly a concern when it has to do with river management, and actually with some of the natural hazard assets that we're currently managing as well. So that's kind of a potential concern there, and something that we want to alert the government to, is to it could be done through permitted activity conditions or entry conditions to those standards. Just alerting them to, be mindful of those things.
Kieran?
so is that question basically or statement basically saying that where we have natural hazard mitigation, which could be a stop bank, it could be a bank to stop an alluvial flow or something, that they have to consider their effects on that before they go put something up?
Allow for those effects to be considered through the process.
Cool. That's heavy. Yep, I read it.
Thanks, Kevin. I've got a question, I guess, because it's talking about distribution and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So does that make the electric vehicle charging part of the overall, like the network, part of the actual electricity network? And how does that fit in when you've got like private people putting in EV charging things here, there and everywhere. Was that just really to do with government funded EV charging?
I think it has to do with public infrastructure, so not private infrastructure for EV charging, but publicly provided.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is, I'm not right into EVs at this stage, but so is a lot of the EV charging points now, are they public EV charging points or outside grocery shops and that sort of full car parks, that sort of place?
I assume so, yeah.
Get the app, go for it.
Yeah, I just wondered whether, it creates a whole new level of, we're going to be doing permitted activities, getting, pretty much into everyday life. It's not like what I would see in our electricity network as being the power poles or the underground wires and gets to the connection into the house or into connection to wherever it's sort of taking it to the next level. Is that right or am I got that wrong?
It's a very expensive thing to have to go and get resource consents for unnecessarily. If it is generally at one point that it will make sense in a network. And especially in small rural towns, there won't be a huge capacity necessary to do that. And we just, but if you get resource consent for all of those sites, if you permit it, it just makes it a lot easier for the right thing to happen. Easier.
Because like on the second part there, your permitted activity rules managing, around river crossing, groundwater takes and that sort of stuff. So is that, how is permitted and permitted? Is that like, is there like levels that it goes to?
But there will be certain conditions that they need to meet in order to be permitted, and the same with a controlled activity status. But I think the point is that of the whole change was to provide certainty to those providers. So I think the rules would take primacy over regional rules. They would be trumped.
Yeah, so their rules would become,
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to go stricter than their rules. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think that's the case at the moment, and perhaps we could build that into the submission.
I'd like to see what other people think of.
Isn't it just to give one system all through the country to be the same? So that you don't have 76 different plans you're going to, and that makes sense. Whether there are rules in the yes, you may want to.
Yeah, I just sort of understood the other ones because they're like, big picture stuff, the pylons and that sort of stuff, whereas this one's getting down to into the neighbourhood stuff, which is, that's all where I was saying, well, hang on a minute, it looks like it's like could be uncontrolled.
Yeah, what they've done here is kind of put two things together, which sort of relate but are a little bit different. So one is about the electricity transmission, so Transpower's stuff about the lines and everything, and then the EV charging infrastructure, which is very like small.
Yeah.
Like it covers the full range, but it does, it even talks about private charging and making those permitted activities. So
just to confirm what in relation to charging, the proposal is construction, operation and maintenance of EV charging infrastructure to be permitted without any constraints on scale or other variables if it's located in the land transport corridor. To make ancillary EV charging, i.e. your petrol station, your warehouse car park, permitted, subject to compliance with limits on heights and noise and with earthworks. And then standalone EV charging facilities to be permitted outside residential zones, natural areas and places with historic heritage, subject to compliance with limits on height, noise, earthworks. So, yeah, plus the private at home stuff. So there's quite a lot of permitted activity in there. In terms of what the proposal is.
Yeah, no, it was just one question, I guess. And
sorry, not that topic, but just going back to the previous one, where we're talking about the permitted, moving to a permitted activity for the electricity network activities. And also controlled activity, as Tom's alluded to. Would we be expressing in our submission something along the lines that we wouldn't want, because we focus on natural hazards, we've got a requirement to do that, but would we be expressing it in a way that we wouldn't want to exacerbate the situation in any way, shape or form, or put humans at risk? If you know what I'm trying to get our point across, is that we still need to, without being difficult, we still need to keep that elevation. The natural hazard risk needs to be taken fully into consideration. Yeah, I'm just trying to put some words around the emphasis because of those two things. We don't want the actual hazard to be exacerbated in any way, shape or form, and we don't want to obviously put lives at risk.
Yeah, so we've kind of got a working point there, but we could certainly make that a bit clearer about exactly what we're trying to do. And I think it's, well, a question for you is how like whether you want to say, therefore we think it should be a particular activity status, or if you just want to be silent and say that, you know, it would need to make sure that it doesn't do these things.
That's where I was coming from.
Yeah, okay.
Second part, yep.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Elliot and Kate.
Would this affect something like the Lake Hawea water levels that we had the discussion about? With content?
You mean the lake levels?
Yeah,
No,
Yes, REG might. Yeah,
the,
the NPS REG is more likely to be the one that applies and would be considered as an existing REG as opposed to this one. So this one is kind of your rules. Oh no, sorry, you've moved on to this one. But you know, the previous one.
And would that make something like that more easy?
Well, what it would do is just consider the additional effects of the difference. So it wouldn't consider the existing. So it would make it
So it
more
takes the
straightforward.
current lake levels as the status quo.
Yeah. So you'd just be assessing the difference between the two rather than the whole draw.
Right, but if that difference was the difference between the groundwater going dry or whatever, that would still be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you. Look, going to page 14 of the paper, and it talks about controlled activities, undergrounding transmission lines. And it says we are also seeking feedback on options to better enable the undergrounding of existing transmission lines by but ... I have to say the number of hearings I've heard evidence about trees getting in the way and having to route below here, named trees, number of scheduled trees. I think sometimes it has added a significant cost and unnecessary burden. So it's page 12, but they don't talk about trees here, and I'm just saying, I'm just raising it as an issue that as much as I love trees, but if it's for a scheduled sycamore or scheduled gum, I probably would have and since Dunedin is so permissive in having scheduled trees, so it's not on your page, it's on page of their page of the, sorry. Yeah.
Doesn't mention it at all.
So yeah, it's regulation 12, that's would be a good one, and then regulation 14, just noting that that's where the heights come in and they're allowing a 25% increase on the existing, which means that you've always got a 25% on 25% increase, which gets taller and taller. And it no longer allows for public view shafts, which is a problem in certain heritage areas. I'm just pointing it out. I think we've got some landscape issues that may compromise them, but I also appreciate that there is a transmission need.
I'm just thinking about that 25% on 25% on 25%.
They have to renew, yeah,
Which
change
would
my
be all increasing by stealth or subdivision by
Yes, yes,
stealth
yes,
or whatever it is.
Some of us been around long enough to remember cell phones and how quickly they've got to amazing heights. And it does get done as the capacity is driven. But anyway, I think there is a reality that we have to have them, but it's good design of the towers. You remember those terrible ones that they started off in Palmerston North with wind turbines, and they don't do them anymore, but those sort of latest really ugly wind turbines. Sorry if anyone likes that sort of structure.
I definitely think that there's a submission point there in terms of that incremental increase.
And good design, yeah.
Yeah.
So do you like lattice?
I'm just thinking of the ones in Palmerston North. I find them quite restful to look at.
I don't mind turbines, so the single ones, the lattice,
Oh,
lattice.
no, I might not have seen.
Yeah.
First thing you see when you got the plane there.
Okay. I haven't been there for a while.
Just before we move off the electricity type stuff. So, when we're talking about all this sort of stuff, we're, making permitted activity to do this, that, and the next thing. What happens when your electricity network becomes compromised, i.e. it doesn't have enough power coming through the lines? Like particularly around, EV charging and this, that, and the next thing, because they're pretty power hungry. You've got areas like Queenstown where you make it permitted to put in all these charge points everywhere, but you've got to have the power of the lines to actually feed it, because if you make all that sort of stuff permitted, somebody's light's going to go out at some stage.
And yeah, I think obviously that's not, we don't control that, but I think there is a point about, and I think another councillor made it in relation to something else. If you make so much permitted, you lose the ability to actually understand what's going on and have that whole of network conversation. So I think that's a good point to note.
Yeah.
And look, you may have covered it, but look, so where do we sort of look at water and different heads of that? Where do we actually look at outstanding natural landscapes and ugly things up with turbines on them?
So that would fall in the
impression.
definition of sensitive environment.
Yeah.
So yeah, section
It's
6
still there to-
landscapes would. Some of this says, hey, they've got to go there regardless.
Yeah.
And some of them will be permitted, so you'll have no oversight on what they look like.
Wow.
Visual pollution,
Eh?
visual pollution.
Well, and kills birds, and we'll worry about some trout getting killed by a fish screen.
Well, I think that's pretty good. Pretty good.
I could go on for a while about it.
It's sort of- I think we can move on to the telecommunications one now.
It's green, so.
So that deals with a standard, national standard, that basically directs the framework for antennas, poles, cabinets as well. What they're proposing is to basically come up with new definitions and standards that are consistent across the country. So they're easier to use for applicants and for operators, and also for decision makers, because they're consistent. They've also included a number of other initiatives in that proposal that aren't on the slide. One is to make it easier for temporary telecommunication facilities to be erected for a short duration of time, which is a good thing. Because in emergency situations, you want to be able to communicate, and sometimes that's in a remote area that isn't really serviced. They've also are proposing to widen the scope of that NES, not only to cover the cabinets and the poles themselves, but also to manage the provision of additional energy supply, like that keeps them going when there's a power outage, so they can run on solar or wind energy if needed. On the whole, some of the staff looked at it and they thought that it was well aligned with what's in the RPS. It is mostly, however, kind of like a district plan matter, because they deal with design of those structures. And also, like I said before, those additional initiatives of providing for solar and wind turbine energy to power them, and allowing for emergency communication when needed. That is something that actually is a benefit for the community. So we're largely supportive of those things. The standards themselves, they set a standard. The district plans cannot set a more stringent standard above, but they can be more lenient. So they can increase the height if they want to.
Do we have any discussion around that one, or pretty happy?
The reverse sensitivities for this is actually major. It has had very good submissions on the DCC one, especially up on the peninsula, and not having housing too near it. It can cause huge difficulty with radio and telecommunication. This includes radio, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and the need for this, yeah, so it's a reverse sensitivities and being able to, it's fine to provide for them and to be lenient, and I support all of that. It's the inability, their ability to stop other things happening around them, which really needs to be provided for. Otherwise, they become.
Oh, that won't deal with them.
Yeah, that will interfere with them, and I just want to make sure that that is, yeah. Radio is one of the few technologies we've still got that works when we don't have a lot of other things working. Emergencies, yeah.
Andrew?
The other thing too, and I'm not sure whether it's happening, but you want the parties, the providers, to be working together when it comes to establishing infrastructure tiers, or in particular tiers, so that you haven't got them dotted all over the show. If you're going to have them in one spot, the effects, if you've got 4 in one spot rather than one every 200 metres gap, or one on every hill, 3 hills in a row, whatever. So trying to encourage them to work together when they're identifying appropriate places to put the infrastructure. I suppose also potentially on the road reserve as well.
That's actually something that's in there. They allow clustering of infrastructure. Yeah.
Clustering, well said.
Awesome. I think we can move on to the natural hazards one.
Yeah, which Tom's going to talk us through, and Flu's told us we've got to go faster, so.
Okay.
I know. Not on this.
So basically, this is a new instrument, new NPS for natural hazards. Sorry. Yeah. To support new development, so it only applies to new development with a risk-based approach. It defines what is a significant risk based on a matrix that looks at the consequence of the presence of natural hazards and the likelihood of them occurring. It basically has an objective that seeks to set land use or use controls that are proportionate to the level of risk. And then there's also a range of policies that try to give effect to that objective. They basically require you to look at likelihood, consequence, risk mitigations, and residual risk. They also drive looking at climate change effects over a 100-year kind of planning horizon. Some of the policies also require you to use the best available information, but at the same time, they steer a precautionary approach, and they say when there's not enough or no certain information, that's not an excuse not to take action when it comes to natural hazards. And then there's a policy that requires you to avoid development that exacerbates natural hazard risk. There's no time frame for implementation. So the NPS does not say when you actually need to kind of update your plans to give effect to them. The team has kind of looked at the proposal. It is pretty high level. And the first thing that they noticed is, and it's been said before, there's a need for a greater integration between the NPS for infrastructure and this NPS. So when you develop new infrastructure, you should look at how well is it protected from natural hazard risk. One thing is that we found positive is that the matrix to define natural hazard risk is actually very consistent with what we've got in the proposed RPS as well. What the NPS does, it puts the onus of identifying natural hazard risk on councils. And we would argue that, especially when it comes to consenting processes as well, it should be a shared responsibility. And so the applicants themselves should do some investigation as well. And then also a final point was, desire to have a little bit more national guidance as well on natural hazards, such as flooding. That would basically help to ensure that we apply a consistent approach when using that matrix and identifying the level of risk. So that's where we kind of landed. But yeah, to take any questions or comments.
Sorry, may I ask you, Tom? So you've got us doing this work, and I'm going to refer to the previous one in the Papakainga that we did. We're not covering, and I understand why, but that's really enabling. And you've got a natural hazard. Which trumps which?
Exactly.
Doesn't say at this point. That's the upshot. So I
Okay.
think it's a good.
And yeah, it's because I mean, a lot of Papakainga, Papakainga sites will be either by rivers or especially on the coast. And so that is and climate change is part of that as well. So natural hazards, does it include climate change? Likely climate change?
Well, they define it. There's a definition. It requires you to look at climate change impacts on natural hazards.
Yeah, no, that's rainfall on a landslip, but what about sea level rise?
There is a definition that basically sets out all the
Okay.
natural hazards that are covered by this NPS. But as a council, you have the ability to manage other natural hazards.
So, thank you.
I'll just I've got them somewhere. It has the most obvious natural hazards, they're all included. So the ones that are managed by this NPS are flooding, landslips, coastal erosion, coastal inundation,
Okay, please.
active faults, liquefaction, and tsunami.
Earthquakes
Did you
and-
say fire?
Sorry,
The fires and.
fires is not in there.
Did you say earthquakes?
Well, it talks about liquefaction, active faults,
Okay.
yeah.
And I'm just going to look back to the Papakainga being permissive. I knew I'd read it. So permitted in residential zones, rural zones, Māori purpose zones. But it does say existing rules and standards in district, regional and unitary plans. Not affected include setbacks from waterways and rail corridors, building heights, earthworks, etc. So on natural hazards. So if there's a natural hazard rule that constrains the site, that still applies, otherwise permitted.
The problem is, so this comes in, the larger bit will be in rural, which won't have the natural hazards met because it wasn't intending or perceiving that there would be residential. So the problem is that we've met, Dunedin City has mapped a lot of the natural hazards substantially in the residential because that's the highest risk. This comes in a rural area, largely rural Papakainga, and will facilitate building unless it is mapped in a district plan. And that's the problem, is that disconnect. Dunedin won't be doing another district plan for a while, presumably.
So I think there's one, it's doing the work to, it's not doing the work to understand where the hazards are if it's, you don't have good regional coverage. Because as you say, you tend to focus on where the people are. We certainly do have some hazards outside of that, but I take the point. I think there's probably a submission point on the obligation or the work that creates for regions. And then that second point about the permissive nature of it with the natural
Look,
hazards.
If we were submitting, I'd be absolutely supportive of public going. It's taken far, far too long for that it's hard enough anyway to get the money because of the bank system. You have to have the cash ready. But so I'm really supportive of that, but it should be there should be something about natural hazards in there.
Yeah, I was first just gonna ask how staff felt about those timelines or the lack of timeframe in the national policy statement. You mentioned, and then also if wildfires should potentially be one of the listed hazards. As I'm also looking at the discussion document, and it says climate change is increasing severity and frequency of some natural hazards, and lists a few, including wildfire and sea level rise as well. But I can't actually find that list that you're referring to. So it isn't the main thing.
Yeah.
I can find that, but yeah.
See. We'll bring that into the submission. Yeah.
Reason it shouldn't be, but
Andrew?
Yeah, look, just strongly support what you said, Tom, about the responsibility for applicants to carry the risk assessment burden along with the council. I cannot see why it should be any other way. We already provide a heap of risk assessments when it comes to natural hazards. So we've already got that data there. I don't think we should be burdened with greater costs going forward. If an applicant wants to take the risk, I think they should be responsible for determining how risky it is. Yeah.
So I think, Andrew, you're saying like there needs to be some protection from the risk takers, like the council. We can only go so far, and somebody decides to carry on, we have to have some sort of immunity.
Well, if we've got a natural hazard list where we're discouraging people to build there, I can't see why we would then sort of step over the line to provide greater risk assessments to justify developing the land. We've said that, you know, the existing data that we've got shows that it's a really, really good idea to avoid this, particularly with residential activity. It might be different industrial land being used for tilt slab for a panel beater or whatever. It's not the same risk, but yeah, it sort of muddies the water in terms of their responsibility that we've already undertaken in terms of sharing the information about this as a risky area.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. We need to have some clear lines involved here somewhere to stop the toing and froing and legal stuff. We got any other stuff around the natural hazards stuff? Kevin?
Yeah, just two things on, so we're in all new subdivision, land use development and not infrastructure and primary production. So are we sure we get enough protection from the previous statement that infrastructure development won't exacerbate any natural hazard risks or any natural hazard stuff that we've got? And you probably did say that, you know, when I'm going to put some pylons on the middle of our floodplain or on the middle of our flood banks or whatever. So we don't have to have anything written in that one. We've got enough cover from the previous one to ensure that.
I think it would be using.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's one. It's a way.
There is policy in here that basically should cover that.
Yeah.
But there is a policy that says new subdivision use and development must not exacerbate significant natural hazard risk on other sites or locations.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with
Yeah,
that.
no, I think there's a gap in the NPSI.
Yeah,
I think the point
Ah.
you're making, and I'm looking at it, and it sort of dances around well functioning and resilient, managing adverse effects, but it doesn't specifically mention not exacerbating
yeah,
natural hazards. So I think that the NPSI, we could
yeah,
strengthen
yeah.
it up to tie them together.
Yeah.
Yeah, is
So-
that kind of
yeah.
the first point that
Yeah.
we're trying to make,
Yeah.
maybe?
Yeah.
But I think if we put it in both,
Yeah.
Yeah. And the only other thing was around those descriptors. I really don't care what you call the descriptors, as long as you have a definition of what each means. If you know what I mean. So you're obviously quite comfortable with what they're proposing, because it's just about what we had anyway. So, yeah, as long as the boundary of each descriptor is, whether that's A, B, C, or D, or hybrid, or whatever, it doesn't matter, as long as we clearly define boundaries of each descriptor. That's about all. Thank you.
Awesome.
We've got 6 minutes left for it.
Whatever.
Supposed to be an
Don't
hour.
worry.
No, I don't think.
I'm pretty sure we got that one covered. Yeah, right there, Tom.
Yep, we're good.
Awesome. We'll go on to the Rubberheads Road.
Shall we move on?
Yep.
I'm just relocating because they
Okay,
don't need me for this at all.
so, the next package is package 2, which deals with the primary sector. It's actually quite a broad package. It doesn't only deal with farming, but it deals with the entire primary sector. And so unlike what this picture might suggest is that we're not going to take you for a stroll on the green pastures of a farm. But we're actually going to dive into the sea, really.
Very nice cows, I must say, Tom.
Yeah, look, came up with it.
Hope they're Otago cows.
No problems.
There's 2 proposals within this package that actually seek changes to national direction or national instruments that manage marine aquaculture. So they're proposing to change the New Zealand coastal policy statement, as well as the national environmental standards for marine aquaculture. This topic has been flying a little bit under the radar. We've got a little bit of marine aquaculture in Otago, but it has been fairly limited compared to other regions. But that might change, mainly for 2 reasons. One is marine aquaculture is one of the priority activities that the government wants to encourage. But also because of the changing climate, Otago, as well as Southland, and possibly Canterbury as well, are becoming more and more attractive for this type of activities. Up north is getting too hot, and on the other side of the island, it's probably a little bit too rough. So in the future, we might actually see more activity in this area. So I would like to draw your attention to what is proposed here. We'll get to the NZCPS later. But in terms of the changes to the National Environmental Standards for Marine Aquaculture, they fall apart into 3 categories of changes. The first category is basically a proposal to remove unnecessary restrictions for the reconsenting of existing marine aquaculture farms. And basically what they want to do is, when those existing farms come in for a new consent, they want to enable them to make changes to already existing structures. They also want to allow for additional spat catching when they apply for a consent. And then also they want to open up the use of this NES for all types of marine farms. This NES is fairly young. It only came into existence in 2020, and it was designed to basically guide consenting for farms that were consented prior to this NES coming into effect. So it basically took over the role of all the different regional rules that were in plans, and they put this NES in place. So at the moment, we've got a bit of a regime whereby some farms are still managed under regional rules and others will be under the NES. And basically what they're saying is every marine aquaculture farm should be considered under this NES framework when it comes in for reconsenting. Also, what they want to do is, and that's the second group of changes, is streamline the process for changing conditions on consents. And what I mean with streamlining is they want to make this a controlled activity, but they limit this only for 3 types of changes. So it's changes to the species that are in those marine farms, changes again to conditions that relate to structures, and changes to monitoring conditions. As said previously, they want to make applications for changes to those conditions a controlled activity, but they've put a condition around it. So basically, the condition is that you cannot have a change to the nature of the activity or greater effects. If the change would mean that you'll have greater effects than you currently have, you would be in a different framework and you would be to a more, you would have a different consent status. The intent actually of enabling all those changes is because of the changing climate, they want marine farms to be able to adapt easier, and also they want to encourage innovation. And then the third group of changes has to do with enabling research and trials, and basically provide lenient pathways for research and trials in marine aquaculture, where there are research and trials that don't involve livestock. They can be done as a permitted activity. Where they involve livestock, it would be a controlled or an activity or an RDA. Sorry, it's quite complex, but it is a technical document. We basically looked at it and we're quite comfortable with what those changes are trying to do. So we're kind of in support of removing restrictions on existing marine farms and having them all consented by the NES Marine Aquaculture. We're also supportive of a more lenient pathway for changes to the conditions, as I said, provided that we still have the same types of effects occurring and they don't increase in scale. We do think that the proposal for enabling research and trials, while we're supportive of the intent, it could be improved, because at the moment it's not dealing very well with things such as biosecurity risks, and marine farms, they do have, they come with some biodiversity risks. So we would like some conditions around that, making sure that that is managed. Also allow for better consideration of cumulative effects to illustrate some of the trials that would be consented under this framework could have a size of up to 7 hectares, several hectares, with only like 100 meters separation between them. So if you have a whole lot of them, you could actually get a cumulative effect. And also we want to make sure that it's not kind of becoming a soft consenting pathway for commercial farms, because it allows for trials to occur for over 7 years in some cases. So we want it to be clear what is actually a trial and what is a commercial activity. So it's about refining and putting a few more belts and braces around it. But like I said, on the whole, supportive of what they're trying to achieve.
Thanks, Tom. Elliot?
What's the
process for going from a trial to a full, is it just the regular consent? Would it just be?
It would be a regular consent, yeah.
Process, okay.
Yeah.
So it's just the fact that that allows quite a long period of trial and.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that'll make sense.
Thanks. Kate?
I don't know much about this stuff, so I'm gonna ask some stupid questions. The first question is one of the reasons we don't have a lot of this here at the moment is that we don't have a lot of sheltered harbours to do this sort of thing? Sheltered bays? No, okay. The agriculture I think we have at the moment would be limited to the sort of salmon farming and I appreciate that's not marine, but I'm trying to distinguish why we've got marine aquaculture in here as opposed to aquaculture generally. And because I think that there's a potential that the aquaculture development here, like the salmon farming, I don't know.
So the scope of this instrument is just on marine aquaculture. And in terms of future, where MPI is interested in going in Otago, they are definitely thinking about offshore salmon farming in the marine environment. That's where they think.
Well, the fresh water.
Yeah,
I know,
while there is some on land aquaculture possibilities, the economics of it is that you're much better to just do it out in the sea, and I think the scale would be quite a lot bigger than what there is currently in freshwater.
Okay, and so the risk would be it would get in the way of other users of that area, potentially. Have we, I don't even know where we're at with the East Otago Taipori and whether that was ever regulated or not.
I don't think so.
Hmm?
I don't think.
Still going through the process.
It would be terrible if that got in the,
No, it's outside that, they're planning it, we will last year. I understand.
okay,
Yeah, because it's Taipori is fairly closer to the coast.
okay, and this is, no, I don't know enough about this, where the scale and where it is likely to be. Because that's where it's not clear to me whether it's worth putting in.
Sorry, just go back to the Taipori. I think if you draw a line from roughly Doctor's Point through to Moeraki,
Yeah,
it's all that on the inward side, on the landward side. If you can imagine, yeah, so it's all fairly close in.
and this is all quite a long way out, is it?
Well, there is actually a mix, so they're where the real economic advantage, opportunities are is out far, but there are also some potential for mussel aquaculture closer in. But MPI is pretty careful to kind of exclude, they're looking at the areas that they're looking at, and we've got a paper coming to council next meeting actually about the aquaculture settlement areas,
Okay.
and that will kind of set out.
Okay, so I'm
Some-
sorry, I'm ignorant, I
Yes,
can't see, so, yeah.
Elliot?
Just on that, kind of the same question, but rather than the Taipori, the scenic preserves,
Sorry.
the southeast marine protected areas that are still in the court process, I understand, but in theory imminent. Do we know how those might interact with increased aquaculture?
I mean,
No, that's the answer.
I know.
I was just gonna say, no, I don't think we do, but we can have a look into that.
When it would be a proper farm, you'd still require consent.
Yeah, presumably it wouldn't be allowed
Um,
in those reserves, but
yeah.
how that might.
It won't be with inside those reserves.
No, but
And
Is there
it
any-
will have its own set of
Jason
protections
impacts, okay.
if it's gazette.
Mm.
Kevin?
I understand the 7 years for a trial, because if you're doing something, you'll want a decent period of time to actually see if it's worthwhile going on further. It's just ensuring that it doesn't become the easy pathway to get a consent, I suppose. But the only thing around that trial is about the science behind the species that they're going to put in there. That trial, so salmon's okay, it's got a history, but if it's some other species, you would want to make sure that whatever was being put in was, if it did get loose, it wasn't going to eat all my oysters or my crayfish or my whatever else I want to eat, if you know what I mean. Yeah, that would be the key to it.
The research and trial activities are only permitted where there aren't actually fish or shellfish present. And that's because the RMA prevents a requirement, like it prevents any permitted activities for aquaculture activity. So if it's classified as an aquaculture activity, it can't be permitted. So it's almost the it's actually, how do you define research and trial activities where there isn't a species present? That doesn't open the door to any type of activity, and you say, yeah, it's a research for aquaculture activity. So that was one of the issues that MPIs, when we went to one of those online sessions, and they said themselves that they were a bit they were trying to figure out how to do that, but it's a similar kind of like the whole thing about how do they actually define these so that they are only capturing the activities they want to and not having unintended consequences. I think is probably the point we might want to be making.
And Tom, the other thing you said was about making sure that I think you said making sure the reconsenting process was simplified. So that's good, but then only at the same size. But surely if it was if that part had been working well and really good and they want to increase size, we should only be then considering either the accumulated effects or the additional effects, and we shouldn't make that too difficult. They shouldn't have to, you wouldn't think they'd have to start all over again, that's what I'm saying. That activity, so we've got an activity that's proven, let's say it's beneficial, or it's certainly not causing any harm in that area. So surely, and it's good for everything. So why would you make it too difficult to do the addition?
So Kevin, what you're saying is why not have a controlled activity to expand as long as you're not, there's no.
Well, you're still gonna, but then, we've got to verify whether the expansion part's going to cause an issue or not. You shouldn't have to do the whole process again. It's only based on, you know what I'm saying?
You'd have to
That's something because that's what they're proposing, I think, for renewable energy generation is like your existing effects become part of the environment, like that.
Yes.
That is there, the existing environment. And what you're saying is we should consider this applying the same approach for marine farms, whereby the existing effects are part of the existing environment, and then you only consider the additional ones.
Additional effects,
Yeah. We can make, if there's consensus around the table around that, we can build a submission point around that.
So that's additional effects beyond what the current effect is. Does that make sense? Yeah.
But again, this will bit of knowledge, I just don't understand the scat catching stuff. I do understand that it goes on to beaches and can have quite a number of people driving on beaches, am I right? I saw it in Country Calendar recently.
Yeah,
it was a great program, and that was Nightingale Beach, I think. The concern I have there is that we have some beaches with some biodiversity values that is incredibly high that could be very severely impacted. So I'm just and I appreciate why this is being enabled, but if it's
I actually think this, what they're proposing, might alleviate that to some extent. So they'll be allowed to do spat catching in their aquaculture activities, like within, rather than doing it on the beach, they'll be enabled to catch the spat on their structure.
Naturally come off.
Yeah.
shore.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, so the way that's written is I presumed it, if you've got aquaculture already, which we don't have, you had to go for a new application for spat catching, but this is only in that aquaculture area, not on beach.
Yes, that's
It
right.
doesn't permit any of that because I've been really concerned.
If you could just do a note to
Yeah.
clarify that, I think.
Yeah, that we just have to, don't enable, I would rather submit that there are some beaches here that we shouldn't be enabling it. And we should,
You know, it's only within the aquaculture area that they have the consent for, that they would be,
sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
that's it.
Andrew?
This is a comment rather than a question, but just thinking back to Tom's introduction. So you've had an NES for marine aquaculture since 2020. I think you said. So it seems to me that these proposed amendments are possibly learnings over the last 4 or 5 years. So, yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah.
That makes me think.
no, that's exactly right. They did a review, I think, a couple of years ago, and most of these changes have come out of that review. Yeah.
Thank you. Tim, you have a comment?
Yeah, I don't know, you might have covered it, but I was just, I'm interested in the unintended consequences of these sort of marine farms, and I guess at this stage we don't know quite what they may be. I'm aware that there is some form of kelp farming that is being encouraged, but I'm just wondering about the unintended consequences that, I mean, we're experiencing at the moment by catch and with fishing, and just the protection for endangered species, whether there's any kind of allowance made within this proposal to recognise that.
You don't want it to end up like trout and galaxids, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that through the original consent and through the consent process, the effects on biodiversity and other environmental impacts would have been considered. So
That's an assumption. So I mean, it's just, I think these things, you know, it's just the unintended consequences. We don't know. There may be kelp farming that takes place at some stage, and there are, you know, kelp forests are really attractive for instance, the Hueho. So
there is provision made, and for example, the research and the trial provisions, they put in conditions that they shouldn't occur in outstanding areas or in significant marine ecological areas. So it just comes down to how you define or how you map these marine ecological areas then. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this proposal is not about new consents for new activities. It's about having pathways for existing activities to continue with minimum
Correct.
reporting. Yeah. So when you're setting up an initial new agricultural farm, you'd have to go through that process.
Except the trials stuff.
Unless it's
okay, no, look, I just want to raise that point anyway. If it's not important, that's or not seem to be significant, that's fine. But I do just want to make the point that, you know, there are unintended consequences that sometimes arise through this stuff, and it'd be nice to cover them off if we could. Thank you.
I see Gary's online as well. Welcome, Gary. Elliot?
Yeah, just following up on that one, because obviously, like, sea nets are a massive problem for bycatch, and I don't know if the sort of structures that get set up for agriculture can have the same risk. I don't think they do, but worth considering. But those significant ecological areas that Tom mentioned. So who decides what those are and where those are?
My understanding is that we basically have to identify those ourselves.
As a regional council.
Well, yeah. There are some, I think that outstanding areas are defined in the NES. But a little bit like what is happening on land with SNAs or significant wetlands.
Is there a framework sort of to identify those?
We'll have to look into that. In our current coast plan, we've got a number of areas mapped for diverse values, whether they're ecological or recreational. We just have to kind of see whether they would fit in within that kind of denominator. Yeah.
Just heads up that the science work program is working on these ECAs
Yeah.
out in that coastal work plan for a couple of years.
Sounds all good. 10 minutes to 3. I think we might just take a break till 3 o'clock. So we'll just
It's commercial forestry next.
work
Yeah.
for forestry next, and I had hoped to get to it, but it's quite a large subject. So I think we'll have a break and come back fresh. We'll get here just a couple minutes before. On time will be really good. Thank you.
No, I mean, finishing time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Doug. Have we covered, how many of the red things have we covered?
None.
Some of those yellow ones should have been green. Good, thank you.
That's what people use.
Yeah. I don't think we've got the plan yet. have we?
Oh, no, I
See how
no,
they
I even either, no, I don't know. So, yeah, it doesn't seem to be the same. I shouldn't say that, same chaos plan. We actually took
I think he's all right.
impact and legislation package. Is and it's just leaving the state, it just seemed to be so much more. And there has been.
Good to see you. Some people get upset about these things, actually appreciate different things. Yes, yes.
Well, I'd say a health.
Yeah, no, it's, my husband, Phil went in with his neighbour, and they called him, drove close to the stream, and they said getting out was easy, which is good, there wasn't the chaos.
Yeah.
Thank you for, I haven't, it's good to have you.
Marine
I know I was late, but I thought. The school holidays. The industry are doing, yeah. It's, there's no rush for this, and I'd rather do it well than, and in some ways I want to get over this week.
I'm not. But
Make the most of it.
Yeah, just check because
Yeah.
if the intent is to simplify.
Yeah. Do you need to consider those? That's okay.
Yeah,
So it actually requires a decision by UPI or it used to be whether a proposed agricultural activity within an officially become restricts access.
No, I'm just conscious that we're still being recorded in the room.
Yeah,
yeah.
but the one find the one because we haven't had the applications in about.
No, I know.
But just flagging that might.
Welcome back to this workshop for looking at the National Directions Package. Got a wee bit to go, so try and keep moving along. So the next subject is commercial forestry. So we'll just hand over to Tom. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. That's a meaty one. And it definitely deserves your attention as well. Because it is something that we debated around this table a couple of times in the context of the land and water plan. But the proposals as well, they affect our ability to manage this land use. The changes proposed largely, I mean, there's a few smaller changes that deal with definitions, but the main three changes are outlined on the slide. And what we're proposing is, rather than take you through all those three, we'll just stop after each change. Sorry, after each proposal and let you discuss that specific one. The first proposal is basically the NES for commercial forestry has a regulation 6, and that has 2 clauses in it that allow us to set more stringent rules in our regional plans. There's a clause that says that we can set a more stringent rule for afforestation. And then there's another clause that says that we can set more stringent rules for forestry activities if they are needed to achieve an objective in a regional plan that seeks to give effect to the national policy statement for freshwater. And it is proposed to change Regulation 6 to remove the ability to set more stringent afforestation rules and to replace the ability to set more stringent rules for giving effect to the NPSFM by having a much narrower clause that says that you can only set rules in a regional plan if there is 1, severe erosion risk with significant effects, 2, that we're dealing with a risk that isn't managed by the National Environmental Standard itself, and that risk is defined or identified on a map, basically, at a high resolution. So that restricts our ability to actually set more stringent rules. We had staff to look at this. Basically, we've got 3 concerns. One is around the actual language that is used, like what is a severe risk? What is a significant effect? What are risks that aren't managed by the NESCF? And also the 3 criteria. We're not quite sure whether they're ands and or ors, so that's not really clear. So there's a bit of unclarity around it, what it means. But also, we're concerned that environmental effects are not always effects that are directly linked to erosion. You could have effects on
Carbon compass.
yeah, EV values, or it says severe erosion. It might be that this erosion is not severe, but more like cumulative and ongoing. And then there's also the issue around, we're seeing forestry appearing in areas where it wasn't previously, where we don't often have good information on. And also it's hard to predict what's going to be the effects of forestry in 20, 30 years time. So if I'm honest, we are having some concerns with restricting our ability to manage forestry. Fully acknowledge that we need to have good information if we do that. But as a principle, yeah, it is something that we're having some concerns about.
Where do we start?
Yeah. Yeah, it might just be worthwhile noting as well that in our land and water plan, just to give you some context where we landed, in the draft was that we were gonna manage afforestation, not per se for water quality, but more for water quantity. So any additional forestry over 10 hectares in an over-allocated catchment would need a consent. So, yeah. Like I said, happy to answer any questions on that first point, and yeah, keen to take your comments as well and incorporate it into our submission.
Kevin?
So where you say that you can only apply more stringent rules on those three specifics, so could we not, if we're taking the government direction of catchment controls, or catchment action plans, integrated catchment management, is that not possible to get down to that detail there, with what we can and can't do catchment? So if it's not covered by commercial forestry, which could be what is short catchments where we've previously put that restriction in, could we not put that in there? If they're going to allow for catchment action, if they want the catchment action plan to be that, or the catchments to be the driver, will we not have that opportunity to put it in there?
Not for water quality reasons. So the NES doesn't manage water quantity, and that was the reason why the draft plan was able to include rules about afforestation and water short catchments to address water quantity issues. But in terms of water quality, there would be no ability to put a more stringent rule.
But it's not managed by it though.
Well, that,
So therefore you can put a more stringent one in. No? No, it's
Yeah.
the other way around, is it?
so because there are rules in the NES that deal with matters, so to do with afforestation and what setbacks you need and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
That the argument is that risk is being managed by the NESCF.
Oh, right. So
Yeah.
so those, yes, so they're saying that is sufficient to do that.
Yes, that's right.
Right. Wow.
I think the integrated catchment management approach, generally that's be a non-regulatory type approach as well. Whereas what this has done is saying they're managing the effect as opposed to preempting it, like, or doing, having a non-rule based one. So it's only on the special areas. I think when I was reading it, the severe erosion risk one, bullet point 1, that was pretty well defined in the paper, in the discussion document.
Yeah, it is, but it's based on the erosion susceptibility
Yeah.
classification. Yeah, which is based on the land use capability classification, which in Otago is at a scale that means that erosion susceptibility classification system is
Yeah,
like not
yeah,
the
yeah.
greatest.
Yeah, and the other one, the risk is identified in the defined area. So that's like a risk that's outside. It's not managed by EPS if production forestry, commercial forestry.
But,
So
so is it,
what would be an example of that?
is it the third bullet point?
Third bullet point.
The third bullet point is basically you have to map where that risk exists, and that's not really a problem. I talked to the science team and they said that criteria is not difficult to meet. We could manage with that one. It's the two above that are more problematic.
Yeah. That's right. That's all good. Hey, we'll go to Tim.
Yeah, thanks. Just in terms of the NES CF, I mean, I think we were getting close to a bit of that in our land and water management plan. I mean, and the NESCF, it focuses on the sort of the core commercial forestry activities, from my understanding, and good forestry practice. What are the concerns that you have that the NESCF is actually not good enough? Do you have those concerns?
Yeah, so that was kind of where we got to with the, if you could just flip to what the land and water plans, where we got to. So that third bullet point there about managing the effects of harvest, which was in terms of managing sediment and slash in Otago, and it kind of comes back to the point I just made about the erosion susceptibility classification system, and how that isn't like we do have evidence that doesn't really give a true picture of the erosion risk of some parts of Otago. So and I guess what we're saying is that we're not sure that, or well, probably what we're relying on is unlikely to be sufficient to meet this even narrower scope.
Okay, so the NESCF hasn't changed, are there amendments to it or something?
This is the proposal, is that there are these amendments to it.
To the NESCF?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So well, let's think about that for a minute. We'll just go to Kate and Kevin.
Yeah, I'm still coming to terms with this when because we've got the farm reforestation rule that also has an effect. And it seems to me that what's missing here is proactive mapping of what the best land is that's suitable for this. And if you're going to look at the catchment context, that's where we should be going, and saying that land which is ideally suited to commercial forestry, whether it be carbon or otherwise. And then there's the next discussion of what those trees should be. And in the Otago context, it is perverse that they've got a rule talking about social infrastructure like schools and hospitals, and then you've got the very activity that is decimating rural communities of a need to have those that infrastructure. And that I don't think it's a long bow to say that. I mean, areas that like Lawrence and Tuapeka are just becoming retirement villages without families, and it's really, really sad. The populations, the job numbers have gone down. And the populations have all shrunk, or if they haven't shrunk, they're just elderly, and that's So anyway, I think if you're going to be permissive, you have to have a mapping rule that limits where that permissive, or at a scale or something. There has to be something that brings it back, and that's not in there at the moment. It's an incomplete toolbox.
Yeah, I think just thinking aloud of what a submission point might be, in terms of if we could say something about proactively determining where afforestation can and should occur, and maybe that's through the spatial planning process that's coming.
Or catchment.
And the catchment.
Catchments go. I mean,
Totally.
the other thing to manage is fire risk, which can be absolutely substantial given the, and that again comes down to ensuring that there's good water. And that I know is in some areas done well, in some areas it isn't.
All right. I'll go to Kevin.
I'm just not sure whether I've got this right or not. So we're saying under the new rules, we don't have to have a planting plan?
So we're planning to cover that in a minute, but if we can, if you can do that now if you want. But yes, that's right. So
So that's
the
So
second
the
point there is
page we need to flip it, and we don't have to have a harvest. They're saying you won't have to give us a harvest plan, which we normally get.
there is still the requirement for a harvest.
It's
plan.
still staying in, but we won't have to get a replanting plan in timeframes.
No
We've got no
replanting.
idea
plan
what's
at all.
being planted, and we've got no idea when they're going to tidy up afterwards.
And just a comment on, just from myself, I think it's quite dangerous. Drawing lines on maps, like defining, areas suitable for afforestation. At the end of the day, the market would determine that, and it's more about, I think from my point of view, it's not about drawing lines on maps, it's about managing the possible effects of increasing forestry here in certain areas. We've got, like in our land and water plan, we spotted the risk in over allocated catchments or water short catchments and the risk of increasing forestry in there. So we put in some controls around that. So I see that as probably the better option than trying to define certain areas. Does that make sense? So it's a really tricky one because what they're doing, they're making it very enabling of forestry, particularly the severe erosion risk. Probably, the way you read it, it's probably not something that's we're not going to get a severe erosion risk in Otago. Pretty much, it's going to only be on extreme areas, and so it's pretty much what it's saying is pretty much opening the door. And just one that hasn't been covered, and this could be a really quick answer, hopefully. What about the non-commercial forestry, the carbon forestries? Is that under a different NES?
No,
No,
that's
it's the
one.
same, so the same rules, yeah.
Commercial.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's commercial.
So it's both plantation and carbon forestry is covered by
yeah,
this.
so what this is doing, so there's no requirement for afforestation or planting plans for potential carbon forestries down the line, which I think is quite risky, not knowing where those areas are that it's not intending to be managed. And does that make sense? Yeah. Hi, Andrew. And then I'll go back to Tim.
Probably heard some of my views before, a year or so ago. But anyway, the NESCF has been around since November 2023. And the rules in the NESCF relate to forestation, pruning and thinning to waste, earthworks, river crossings, forest quarrying, harvesting, mechanical land preparation and replanting. So I suppose my question is, I just heard Fleur mention we've got evidence that the system's not working. So since November 2023, if we're going to include in our submission that we're suggesting stronger rules, yeah, I hope our evidence. I'm not suggesting you haven't got evidence, but I'd like to cite that if we're going to put that in
I
our.
don't think we would. No, I was just kind of indicating that the direction that things were going in the land and water plan would no longer be able to be done. So that that was all I was just trying to,
And the other thing I had a bit of a beer bug about is the 10 hectare rule around your
Water short areas.
yeah, that the low yielding catchment, the requirement for anything over 10 hectares, you would need a consent. And if you look at the majority of the forestry is planted probably within 50 k's of the coast, simply it's uneconomic to cart it, a couple of 100 k's to a port or a forestry processing site. So you've probably got very, very little forestry occurring in low yielding water catchment. Low water yielding catchments. So I think a Kakadui is probably one that will come to mind. But once again, I like to think we've got some hard evidence if we're going to go down those pathways. That's just, yeah.
So sorry, I might have not been particularly clear about what the slide was showing, but it was just to kind of remind you of where things were at in the draft land and water plan.
Sure.
Not to say that we're going to promote these to the government, or it's too soon to decide whether we'll go in this direction still, but it was just to remind you of where things had kind of got to.
I suppose I'm just positioning myself.
Yeah.
Who's got the evidence to back it up? That's
So I'll just comment, one of the problems with that is it's a 30-year evidence gathering thing, because there's been such a big increase in forestry over the last 5 years. It's going to take 20 odd years to see what it looks like when they get cut down. Yeah, so sometimes you have to go with what you know. Tom, you've had time to.
Yeah, I have. No, thank you. Look, a few things. It seems that these stringency provisions, from what I'm picking up from you guys, is that, you know, even though it sounds like councils can make more stringent rules than the NESCF, it's actually sort of a false negative, in the sense that that's in limited circumstances, and it's only in sensitive and local and unique environments. So staff have got a real concern around that. Is that what I'm picking up?
What we're just trying to highlight is that that essentially there was some discretion around setting more stringent rules. The proposal is to reduce that quite a lot, and that the direction that council was heading with the draft land and water plan was to have some more stringent rules, quite limited in terms of just that harvest controlled activity rule.
Yeah.
So what we're just trying to highlight is that that's not going to be possible if this proposal goes through.
Okay, so in terms of our submission, then that's a concern that staff have, and also that I would have. I mean, the key problem with harvesting is sediment issues, isn't it? Is that the main thing that we are concerned with?
Yes, that's right.
So is there any way that we can actually make some submission around that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the purpose of these sessions, Tim, is to I guess give some input for Fleur and the team to draft that submission, which is coming back at the end of the month. So that's
well, certainly from my point of view, the impacts of sediment in catchments is really quite significant, and it shouldn't be minimised.
Thanks.
Leave it there. Hopefully some other people will support that.
Kieran?
Yeah, agreeing with you there, Tim, but is that exactly what the introduced slash management risk assessment is going to cover, though?
In part,
So where does that fall down?
it will, it occurs at the stage of harvesting, but it doesn't cover all aspects of harvesting. Harvesting involves, like you said, creating landing areas, tracks. So it deals with one of the activities, but not all of them. But they do have to prepare a harvest plan.
Right. Yeah, so have we actually, because I'm agreeing with what Tim's saying, but have we got enough information on that risk assessment and those plans that they have to provide to say that we're actually falling short? Or will there be enough in that stage management risk assessment to make sure that because I'm just going back, because this is basically around Gisborne and the likes, where they've had these major disasters that they've looked at it. So
Yeah, so the slash management risk assessment is, I mean, it's going to sound obvious, but it is focused on slash. It's not really concerned about sediment. It's concerned about mobilisation of slash, and the changes that they made to manage slash. If the concern is that there are two
distinct problems.
Just that they're too kind of difficult in some circumstances. And so the idea of having a slash risk management risk assessment is that sometimes it might not be the best thing to take all the slash off, and actually that's creating different problems.
Yeah.
And so, the idea of the slash management risk assessment is to assess that risk and to determine how best to manage slash in particular. Not, I mean, there will be some co-benefits for sediment, but It's not really about managing sediment.
Cool, okay, so then therefore I'll just reinforce Tim's thing that we need to put something in there about ensuring for water quality, and well, it's just more than water quality, it's ecosystem quality is the ability to ensure the correct management of, or the best management practices for sediment.
Yeah, and the other thing to recognise too is that, you know, slash management is not as a serious a problem in Otago as it is up there.
Come up to Herbert Forest and I'll show you where it doesn't get done, and I think you'll reassess that.
Yeah, okay.
Can I just ask, would that, you know, bringing in, highlighting sediment management, will that become part of your harvesting plan? Because that's probably the risk period for sediment.
Or and when the site's naked after, you know, it's for that
That
period of
big part of your
restabilising.
harvesting period, yeah.
It's more than just a.
I was just trying to, like, what are we asking for? Like, you know, are we asking for the to have a controlled activity for sediment management, or what are we asking? Is it just, are we just highlighting the sediment is probably the main issue for us, but how do we manage it? And maybe I'm trying to find a pathway to management which doesn't involve, you know, a whole lot of, you know, and our rules are subject to interpretation.
And the point that we would like to make as well is, like, it actually comes down, managing those effects at the harvesting stage requires you to start thinking when you plant them, really. And that kind of brings you on to the next point. Sorry, I don't want to move on, but I think it's related. The afforestation plans and the replanting plans are going to be that requirement is going to be repealed as well. When you do an afforestation plan, you have to say where you're going to plant trees, but you also have to say where you're going to put tracks, and you're going to have to say where you're going to put your landing areas. So when you start preparing your afforestation plan, you're already thinking ahead of where you're going to harvest. Maybe that is a starting point to start dealing with those issues there. And so we're concerned about that. I think keeping the afforestation plans in will make it a lot easier for people to actually come up with a good harvesting plan, and it will actually avoid for some to apply for a consent. Because if you don't meet the permitted activity rules for harvesting, you still need a consent under the NESCF. Most operators will probably start the afforestation process by thinking ahead. But for somebody who isn't experienced in this area, having those plans in place might actually resolve some of the issues.
So that's quite a relatively non-regulatory tool, which is like the forestry equivalent of a farm environment plan. It's a forestry environment plan, which you're setting up at the beginning. So you've got a template to work to, which makes complete sense to me.
It is. We don't have a lot of say in that. Like, they have to provide it to council, but we cannot decline them. Blue sky thinking, a system like freshwater farm plans would actually be like a good step in the right direction, whereby it's kind of like certified by somebody with experience and knowledge in these areas.
Yeah. Elliot?
So is it sort of fair to say that maybe you know, one of the two of these being repealed might be concerning, but it's both of them being repealed together that's probably really concerning.
Exactly. There's a lot of things. Sorry, there's a few things with the NES that we're kind of a little bit like, this is tricky. But there's some low-hanging fruit. There is some like addressing one issue might alleviate the need to address other issues. And then a good working afforestation plan or replanting plan may alleviate the need to set more stringent rules. Fleur talked previously about the fact that the NESCF, a lot of the tools for managing harvesting, planting, pruning as well, that and slash management, they're based on what they call an erosion susceptibility calculator. It's basically a nationwide map that splits the area up in zones, like green zones, yellow zones, orange and red zones. It's not very accurate. If we could replace that with a tool, and I believe we actually have that is better suited to our environment, again, it would help with addressing all the other issues. So we're not wanting to get it our way per se. But yeah, like I said, there's some low-hanging fruit there.
I just think by not having those sorts of things in place, we're just pushing a possible disaster ahead 30 years. And why and having 10 years in this game, because I ran a timber company for sawmill for 10 years and seeing the effects of very poor management happening in some of those sites. That the reality is we've spent the last 3 or 4 years working with our farming community on winter grazing plans, and we've seen a huge improvement in people's perception of erosion, sediment control and everything. And now we've got some really good practices. One good forest in the middle of the Pomahaka or the Kakanui being done poorly will destroy all that good work. Just as simple as that. So, I just, and look, I don't think we need any, I think where we ended up was in a pretty good spot with the, because we weren't trying to repeal the commercial forestry, the NESCF. We were just simply ensuring where the risks were there that we could take we had something around it. So I think we need a greater oversight. And that's not, and it might only be on an educational front, but we need a greater oversight when these things are being established. And we certainly need, I mean, I took Andrew last term around the site up in the Herbert Forest. It was just an absolute mess. And they're good people, if you know what I mean. So had their plant, and they were harvesting something that was planted 30 years earlier. So that created the problem. It wasn't so much, but yeah. So no, look, they're making a 30-year investment. So what's another half an hour or a couple of hours to sending a plan and let's have a look at the plan. So
Yeah,
I'm really worried about that.
I think we're pretty much
Yep.
most of us on the same page here. I think, Kate,
No, mine's just about the modern control, and I think the ability to manage the coning and the seed by planting, even having a different tree type, assisting that is absolutely pivotal in our areas that are susceptible, especially the tussock land. Yeah, did we cover that? I missed it. No. Yeah, I think we just have to say that in Otago and Canterbury, it is such a big issue. It's just
Include that in everything we send up on.
Yeah.
Any sort of line.
But so, and that's where there has to be a reset that gets us to a different type of wood, and I think that is sort of alluded to in here, isn't it? That they're wanting a bigger range of wood types, or am I just being hopeful when I read something about that? I think I've been hopeful. Okay.
Yeah.
She laughed at
I
me.
didn't pick that up. It could be.
Radiator's awesome. It's a completely underrated timber. It's just the way people manage it.
yeah, just before we move on, we'll get Gary's got his hand up. Gary.
Yep, thanks for that. My answers to the 3 questions would be yes, yes, and yes. I think I was just getting a bit worried that the discussion was going to start quite but I think I'm probably the polar opposite. I think there were clear messages from the forestry sector for Otago that we were going too far in where we were going to arrive at with our draft land and water plan. And what's being repealed here still does allow for more stringent rules around those 3 bullet points. So so that would be my position. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Andrew, coming in for the last say.
Just going back to the silt issue, why don't we promote the idea of silt traps being a controlled activity? So just some standards around what that looks like, and they're part of the original plan that's submitted in advance of planting the forest. And
Yeah.
something around that they need to be, maintained leading up to harvesting or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. So you're sort of reasonably in favour of like a pre-planting plan,
Well,
like a farm plan? or-
yeah, 100%, yes, yeah.
Yeah,
There's plenty of advice out there and it doesn't cost a hell of a lot.
yeah,
Simple as that. And as Tom's alluded to, they provide or anticipate all the consequences of not only getting the planting done, but getting the harvesting done. So that's all,
Yep.
the tracks exactly where or not exactly where they're going to be, but
Yeah.
approximately where they're going to be, all that sort of thing. Skid pads, etc. So, yep.
yeah, so I agree with that. No, only way I'd be talked out of that would be if the introduced / management risk assessment included a sediment risk assessment per site, which would probably give us the same result.
Yeah.
I think we probably talk ourselves through this one. I think unless you guys got any other questions, because I think we've covered probably that whole list of about 4 or 5 slides.
Yep.
Yeah. That's good discussion. So excellent. I think we can and we also need to note Gary's points as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Coastal policy statement. I think we've got about 4 to go.
Yes, and this is a fairly simple one, hopefully. This is the second set of changes that deal with coastal environment. These changes affect basically 2 policies in the NZCPS. Policy 6, basically what they want to do is bring this policy more in line with other policies that allow for certain activities, like port activities, to occur in the coastal environment. And they've made a few changes, including, again, adding the notion of functional and operational needs to this policy. So you have to consider both when you're considering activities under this policy. The intent here is, I think, primarily to kind of promote infrastructure and marine aquaculture as well, because they're kind of captured by what the government terms priority activities. A second change is to policy 8, and that basically includes now a direction for regional councils to provide for aquaculture in aquaculture settlement areas. That still means that they need to go through a consenting process. So we cannot permit them. We just have to give proper consideration for those activities. And also to consider cultural and environmental benefits when we're considering those activities. Basically, the change to policy 6 is in line with the court's decision in Port Otago case. So it has very limited impact on our policy framework. We also think that the changes will actually make it easier to kind of apply this NZCPS and to consider activities in the coastal marine areas under that instrument as well, because it allows you to kind of read the avoidance policies together with the more enabling policies. And like I said, the change to policy 8 is enabling, but it still requires applicants to go through a consenting process. So no red flags actually there
So
from a staff perspective.
yeah, do we have any discussion on that? It seems rather straightforward.
It's not too dissimilar from the infrastructure one, really, on the operational and functional needs. Yeah.
It references infrastructure in the paper, but it also references resource extraction. Do you have no concerns about that? True. It's underwater mining, I thought, and potentially sand. And I thought that was in there.
Yeah, it is, yeah, it would be falling under that first kind of bullet point, yeah.
Given our wildlife capital of New Zealand, in Otago, I personally just made me slightly nervous reading that. Because it is a relatively permissive, which it hasn't been in the past. And the consequences, I don't know what the question is, what effect would that particularly have on wildlife and their ecosystems? And will they get a good consideration in any consent or process to do it?
I believe so, they would still be properly considered, but it would, yeah, it would be more enabling for them, they would, yeah, lower the threshold, I believe, for those activities to be considered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just makes me nervous, given some of the species, but I'm sure that there's going to be some people who challenge that thinking as well.
Thank you. I think the key to that one is priority activities. Definition of. Is there any more discussion?
Yeah, just agree with you there. That definition of priority activities is possibly open to interpretation. So functional needs is another one, I suppose. But
So resource extraction is a priority activity. That is.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so it is, that is,
Yep.
and so that would be, I think the other ones all make sense.
Mhm.
The priority activity, including resource extraction, I think this is my point, I didn't articulate it well, is one that is less understandable in the context of the other priority activities.
Yeah.
Could you just go on mute, Alexa?
Please.
Please. Didn't give me a chance to get that out, it's coming.
I think that might be, I think what Kate, that's probably a good point, just around extraction plus, I think would probably make us all a little bit nervous, but I think probably worth a mention. In no other comments, I think we can move on.
Right, good to hear from me. So this next one is a focus on the NPS for highly productive land, and the proposal here is to remove LUC 3 land from the definition of highly productive land. So just a slight refresher in case you're not remembering what this NPS does. Basically, it is intended to protect land that is highly productive, and the idea being that is those lands that are more able to be used for more diverse activities. So that's why our 1, 2, and 3 were originally considered, and the idea is to protect them from urban sprawl, essentially. So the proposal here is to remove that third category, which is actually quite a big proportion of the total protected land. So that's the first thing. The second is to introduce these special agricultural areas. And the third thing is to either extend the timeframes for mapping or suspend them until the new RM system is in place. Oh dear. still got mine revised by me. Sorry about it. So yeah, our initial thinking here is that restrictions for rural lifestyle development on LUC3 should be kept. And the reason for that is that at the moment, if there's a restriction on being able to do rural lifestyle, so, you know, lifestyle blocks essentially, and yeah, the point of doing that is that it kind of creates potentially fragmentation of highly productive land around areas like Alex and that kind of thing is where that can be a problem. Most of our highly productive land is not LUC 1 or 2 or even 3. So from our perspective, there was always this need for that additional mapping step, which the NPS provides for protecting other land that's highly productive. So that's like the orchards and vineyards and that type of stuff. We think that the special agricultural areas could protect those types of land that I was just describing. But at the moment, it's very unclear what the criteria and the process are for determining those areas. So our submission could say something along the lines of that it should be flexible enough to allow for those places that we want to protect, can be classified as special agricultural areas. But I would just say that it does kind of duplicate the existing ability that we have to map additional areas anyway. So there's sort of a question mark for me about whether that's even necessary or if it can be done anyway through the additional mapping that can be done. And our preference would be to suspend the mapping requirement and do it properly through the spatial plan process rather than do something kind of now and, you know, quickly and then try and map it into the spatial planning area. But yeah, that's essentially what we are thinking. But I will just take us back to what the proposals are.
Awesome. So we got any discussions? Andrew, have you getting to?
I don't fully understand the second bullet point. Most highly productive land in Otago is not LUC 1 or 2, much of it is not LUC 3.
Sorry, I probably shouldn't have put most. Yeah, I probably should say a lot. I actually don't know if it's most or not, but the point being that a lot of the land that is highly productive is actually LUC 5 or other areas in central around the orchards and vineyards.
So yes, so the definition of highly productive land is the generating a larger amount of revenue off a smaller piece of land. That's how you've got to that.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. I think with the viticulture and horticulture land areas in Otago, which are going to be probably LUC 3 or maybe even above. I think potentially mapping those at some point, identifying where these areas are and mapping them does make a lot of sense. But I think if you apply that right across Otago, it doesn't personally make sense to me.
No.
You could eliminate probably 2/3 of Otago. Well, I'm just plucking that out of the air, but there's a big chunk of Otago that it would not relate to.
Can I just jump in? So when this originally came out, we had the Queenstown Lakes and CODC asked us to, well, we were working on an agreed definition of the highly productive land other, so to capture, you know, the flats on the outskirts of Queenstown that have just gone straight away. No, but the winery ones that thank you, the Gibson Flats and the Fernscrew areas and those sorts of areas, because they're 4 and 5 and 6 actually, they're the really stony soils. And so the point Fleur's making is that we still want to do that, we still want to protect that area. We don't want to blanket map 4, 5 and 6, we just want to protect the areas that our TAs want us to protect. for their highly productive land that isn't LUC 1 or 2. And so what we're saying is there's an ability to do that under the MPS, and it looks like potentially there's a double up with the special agricultural areas, might give us 2 avenues to do it, whether if that stuff could be considered agricultural. But that's the stuff, not a blanket, but a specific targeted. Waitaki didn't have a lot of other outside of 1 and 2. Clutha didn't, but it was Central Otago and Queenstown Lakes, and it's those stone fruit, wine, Ernst Plates, Millers, that sort of areas that fall outside of that we'd still want to protect from that intensification.
So you would potentially, could we create unintended consequences where you have a fluctuation in market price? Viticulture has become marginal unless you're a certain size. So and I think we had a submission from the guy that lives in Gibson Valley who had deep pockets, and he had ensured that certain things weren't happening with pieces of land in and around viticulture development to try and stop small blocks being sliced up, land use intensification. So I'm just asking the question: you get markets that fluctuate, and when that occurs, and just say, let's just take the LUC 4-5 where the viticulture occurs in Gibson in and around there. If we had restrictions on what you could and couldn't do, would that potentially have it could influence real estate prices, for example? I don't know, just random, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right though. But and if the great market bottomed out, then that might not be the highest and best use, and you might have had a protection over it. You're 100%. You're 100% correct. Yep.
And I've got Tim, Kate, and Gary.
Sorry, just a question to clarify for me. The LUC class 1 to 3 is 3 out of 1, 2, and 3 is the worst, or is 1 the worst, or how does it work?
Yeah, so it's about how versatile the land is, like how many different types of uses you can have, and class 1 is the best, and it kind of goes from there. So there's sort of, as the number increases, there's more limitations on what it could be used for.
Okay, so we're wanting to protect class 1 and 2 particularly.
But that's what the government proposal is. Yeah, well, the current is to protect 1, 2, and 3,
Yeah.
and they're proposing to remove 3, so it would only be protecting 1 and 2.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
But they're adding in the ability to protect special agricultural zones.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Gary's good.
You then, Gary.
I can understand this being Pukekohe and Te Ora a situation that becomes very different in the South Island, especially inland because of water, which, it makes it more moot point. And so for us, I can understand removing LUC 3, but I don't necessarily think that's a nationwide issue because so much land, urban land, is already extended into that, and LUC land in some parts of the North Island would be very, very usable. But in the context of Otago, I can understand it. The issue, it is about water supply, and the special mapping areas. I think the thing that's missing in reading it probably too quickly is the reverse sensitivity, and that's certainly one for grape growing and for even the cherry orchards and stuff. So, and maybe that's where the special mapping areas help the reverse sensitivities. But
I think, sorry.
Yeah, no, good.
What I was going to say is I think that restriction on the lifestyle development on LUC 3, retaining that would help with that kind of reverse sensitivity issue to some extent.
Sorry, the Queen Street blackcurrant growers of the 1990s or 80s, sorry. The sad thing about good rural lifestyle subdivision, they can be highly productive on small lots. It's just when they use it as an excuse for subdivision that it becomes really problematic.
Apple fields. Apple fields.
Apple fields, indeed. It's worked for them.
Showing age.
Yeah, well, that's what happened.
Yeah, and so it is that, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fraught one, but yeah, I just want to make sure the special agriculture areas is focused on that reverse sensitivity so that you don't get that development.
Thanks, Kate. Gary?
Yeah, thanks for that. This whole sector is just absolutely fraught with issues. The example, Alex, and I would argue around Cromwell, around Gippsland, the more restrictions there are on land use, then the more options that are removed for the people who are the current land users and landowners. And when I look at around Alexandra, given that the example was used for Alexandra, then I would argue that the rural urban sort of development that's been done around Alexandra for, say, a 5 kilometre radius is probably 100-fold in productivity on those properties than what it was when it was in agricultural land. And I look at the horticultural and viticultural developments that were done 10, 20, 30 years ago that are sitting in around there now. When the current slave to those properties decides they don't want to be a slave to them anymore, the next generation are taking those peri-urban. So I think the horse is bolted for a lot of these towns, and for me, I actually support the changes. I think the ones that are remaining are around protectionisms for very specific, very set circumstances, protecting something that's at an absolute critical. And yeah, if we look to get too restrictive on creating those lifestyle opportunities around our towns, then we just take away an opportunity for the people who are stuck with these things that they don't want. And so, yeah, there's an orchard down the road from me that is it's organic. They have absolutely done their best. They cannot pack their apples, so they're taking the trees out, and they're all being cut out at the moment. Land use was promoted a few years ago as being, we could do hundreds and hundreds more hectares of that, but if you don't have all parts of it, then it doesn't work. So so I mean, I'm very concerned about just where this may evolve to.
Thanks, Gary. Gary, just like this, you're pretty much okay with the proposal as it sits, as presented.
Yes, I am. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Kevin.
Yeah, look, it is a real fraught area. And I look at what's happening around North Otago, and when you see it's just the mindset of people rushing into subdivide to 4-hectare blocks, which has just been absolutely nutty, and where they should have. So if I give an example of a 28-hectare block right in the heart of veggie growing area that could have been subdivided up into 7 blocks, well, really there's 7 hectares of that property that you can't grow anything on. So we could have had 7 1-hectare blocks, and the rest of it, 75% of it, would have stayed in production. So it's around the mindset of people that's just the wrong metrics, I reckon, because most lifestyle people, there's 2 types of lifestyle people. There's people that want to go out and be farmers and create crops and do things on their lifestyle blocks, and there's others that actually just want no more than a hectare to actually build a house that's a bit quieter. So I don't think we've actually grasped that setup, and we could have, and Alex has probably bolted around lots of North Otago, it's probably bolted, but I think some good thinking and spatial plans could make that really good, that we could still preserve a lot of good productive land, but still allowing that peri-urban development, but on the non-productive parts of those land masses. Yeah, pretty simple.
That's all good. I'm not opposed to what's presented, to be honest. I just think the special agriculture areas being the key. So I think that's when you you proactively in your planning, sort out where the special areas are. And then that gets built into your spatial planning for the whole area. And each area, when it comes to land use 3, each area, you know, in some cases, the land use 3, 4, 5 area will come under the special agricultural banner, where other areas it may not. So, you know, I think that's the compromise you make to actually see how we actually protect the land that's worth protecting or needs protection. That would be my comments. I think, sorry, Alexa.
Kia ora,
Yeah.
thank you. I just think this one's so problematic. I pretty much agree with Gary and Kevin. I think probably it's kind of like horses have bolted, but you can usually sort of rein them in a bit. But people are so incentivized to do things in a particular way every time we try and put these restrictions in place. So I'm probably reasonably okay with the way it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexa, and welcome to Gretchen. Let's see, Gretchen's come online.
Thanks, Lloyd. Yep. Sorry I was a little bit late, but yeah, agreeing. Yeah, it's very difficult. Agree with what Kevin said there as well.
I just wonder if there's any views around the table in terms of that second question there about what criteria we might promote to identify special agricultural areas, and also what the process should be. So the government's asking that question about who should lead it. Should it be regional, district, central government? I guess are probably the 3 options. Are there any views about that we could pop in a submission?
I'll crank up. I think it should be led regionally to start off with, and I think the special agricultural areas are areas of that are being developed beyond their. Oh no, it's going to come out wrong. I think I'll hand that over to Andrew Z. You handled that question really well earlier on, you know, around the productivity of the areas that we're protecting. Yeah.
I know we've been around, colonialism's been around for 170 or 80 years, and most of the land that's been identified to be highly productive has already been identified. We sort of know where that is. So, yeah, A, we should identify it. B, yeah, it should be led locally. Yeah.
Water availability has to be in the mix. And that is really the only, the water availability being in the mix, is really the only area that we would need to be leading on that, I think.
And I think this is predominantly around land that's productive for growing things, as in edible things, as opposed to sheep and beef farming, I was say. Yeah, so your vegetables, your viticulture, your horticulture, that type of higher land use stuff and potential higher land use into the future. And it may even involve areas where, you know, special areas where you may get the, like your hydroponic type farming type stuff going on, might be concentrated areas as well.
Can I just ask another stupid question? The LUC criteria, wouldn't that be identifying the special agricultural area? Or does it not do that?
I think because the land class 1 and 2 doesn't cater like your cherry growing and that sort of grapes, cherries, and that sort of stuff, because it's defined on the ability of the land to grow many crops. So those areas don't like too good a land, they like hot, dry land.
Actually, if you turn the special agricultural area, following your point, I mean, it may be gravels in the quantum of gravels for grapes. It may be your region, a port, location near a port. And I think there are so many factors when you get to the South Island as compared to the North Island, whichever, and it's the size of it. You're not going to grow generally vineyards have to be at a scale altogether to get the bottling and the production synergies. So you may get, my father grew grapes in the Waikaha Valley. God forbid he's ever thought that was going to take off. But you don't want to do the niche, you want to do where you're going to have enough people doing it all at once that become a significant industry. And so I think the special agricultural areas would be nuanced, that you'd be looking at your soils, your slopes, your north facing and things like that. That could, and climate, that would give you a lot of benefits, and it has to be at a scale. So I do quite like it, but I think it needs to be open enough to the criteria have to be quite varied and give you quite a lot of flexibility. But water certainly generally would have to be one of them.
Yep, we'll just go to Gary.
Yeah, I agree with Kate there, especially around water, because for a lot of the situation, water is used and a command area is set for a scheme, and that then changes the ability for what you can grow within that command area. And so then land uses do need to be best aligned to water use, and because that whole microclimate is being created because of it. I also wonder whether, across our farmed high country, some sort of protectionisms that sit and ensure that fine wool production or farming production across those properties is able to be continued, because with certain stock classes, then they're suited to those areas and not to other areas. But it would all be based on scale. I think where you have scale and you have every fraction of what you need to maintain that scale and provide the product out to the market is then covered. So that's where I'd be with that, I think. Thanks.
Also, I think we're getting close on this one.
Yeah. I just want to acknowledge Gordon Cousins and Blair Fitzharris, who Blair was a lecturer at the Otago University, and Gordon was a scientist who actually mapped the changes that were available with Lake Dunstan. I know this is a long bow, but when we are looking at water storage areas and the effect that they can have both on the climate and the availability of changing land use, it is really significant, as their work proved, because they were the ones who pushed that stuff and what the climate change would do with having a lake in that side. So yeah, privileged to know them both. But anyway, I think there's that thing that we also have to be looking forward when we do look at water storage, what that may look like, and be flexible enough to add them in as the water storage comes online.
Yep, thank you. It's all everything's in motion over time. I think you got pretty good feedback there.
Yep.
With the feeling. I think we can probably turn on to quarrying.
Yes, quarrying and mining. There's a whole lot of instruments and regulations that refer to these types of activities. There's obviously the NPS freshwater management and the NES for freshwater. There's also the NPS for indigenous biodiversity and the NPS HPL. And then it's also referred to in the national planning standards. And what they're proposing is basically have one definition, because now these activities are all referred to with a different name. So they basically want to align the terminology, and all those instruments have one name for mining. So they're proposing to call it extraction of minerals and ancillary activities, and replace the notion of aggregate extraction with quarrying activities. So that's something that we're all in support of, really, because then all those instruments, they need to be considered, and they're making reference to the same term, and yeah, it's a good thing. What they've also proposed is to make the gateway tests more enabling, and that includes changes to all the aforementioned instruments. They're proposing to add the requirement to provide for a regional benefit, like most instruments talk about, it needs to have a national benefit, but they're adding on regional benefit to that as well. For the provisions in the NPSFM and the NES that deal with wetlands management, they're adding the operational needs test onto the functional needs test. Also, they're removing the notion of public benefits and they're replacing that with benefits in general. And I take the comments that were made around the table previously. And then they've also removed clause could otherwise not be achieved using resources in New Zealand. So basically, it makes quarrying and mining activities, it enables them in wetlands, but also in highly productive land. The bar was sometimes very high. Like if you look at the last point, could not otherwise be achieved using resources in New Zealand. It's a very high bar. Up to you to decide whether you're comfortable or whether they've taken it maybe a little bit too far in certain areas. Sorry. These are kind of staff comments. Like I said before, we support the terminology, making that consistent, and also the consistency in the gateway test, because often activities have to apply under different instruments. And we're comfortable with adding operational need as well. But keen kind of hear what you think.
Gary?
Yep, comfortable with all of those. We need to be far more enabling. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Kate, then Elliot.
I'm concerned about the proposal for aggregate only being national or regional. The local benefit there is because of the distance to Carter doubles in price every few Ks. And I do wonder whether we need to, for aggregate, be even lower scale. And the interesting one there is the timeframes in the NED consents, because they may be things that are only used once every 15 years. If they've only got one consent period, doing renew, I don't know what the consent period you're looking at, but I would just also comment on the need for these to be long-term consents. If that makes sense. You understand the aggregate issue there, or you certainly do from your costings on transport matters, Richard?
Well, just to that one, so how do we define a region though? Does it have to be the region of Otago, or is it just East Otago, or is it just West Otago region, or is it just Moa Flat, or is it, you know what I mean? Like, so therefore the regionally significant doesn't become a too bad an issue, does it?
I'm taking you as a region wide.
Yeah, well, that's not.
That would be my gut feeling, but we can check and come back.
Yeah, which we're already finding that is a real problem. Yeah.
So
Cost to move gravel around is just.
Region wide is something we'll get into an RPS, and this won't be issued probably in the RPS. So that's why I'm saying it has to be local.
Yeah.
You can go to you, Elliot, now.
Yeah, just going back to the public benefit stuff. Is it clear what removing the requirement for the benefit to be public will actually do?
Well, it allows for benefits that are not public, like private benefits or commercial benefits, to be considered.
Mm.
It still allows for public benefits to be considered as that package as well. But should that have the same weight as other benefits? Yeah, that's, I guess, a question for the table. It doesn't exclude public benefit.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if previously did public benefits include the sort of economic and jobs benefits that, you know, industrial project like this might
Mm.
provide.
Don't think it
I
was
don't think
defined.
it would.
No, but the RMA talks about benefits and that would be included.
Yeah. Yes, in that case, yeah, I would prefer, prefer to keep the benefits public then, but yeah.
Just on that one. So I suppose if I look at, let's go out of my area, so Odamatata Station, which is 100,000 hectares, so they want to quarry for gravel for their tracks, which will only ever have a private benefit. So that's, therefore, it doesn't have to have a public, under this, they're saying it doesn't have to have a public benefit now, it's only has to have a private benefit is sufficient. Yeah, that's how. So where would that contradict what you're thinking?
Just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a landowner can take gravel to build his tracks, he just can't sell it. Is that right?
I gave him a bottle of beer. Yeah, but I'm just saying, I'm saying, but this could be quite major.
So just to be clear, this is in sensitive areas in the NPSFM, NPSIP, highly productive land. So it's not like everywhere. Outside of those areas, then you may well be able to do those things already. We're talking about in the what we're going to call sensitive areas. You would be able to do these things even where there's not a public benefit, I guess is the.
Lloyd. You've got within wetlands, so operational need added to gateway test. So does that mean so it's not open slather on wetlands? That just means that if there's a definite operational need to be able to make the actual whole quarry system work that involves the wetland, you would forego some of the wetland for the greater good. Is that what it's saying or
not? You refer to the whole operation, do you mean like not just the quarrying, but also like ancillary activities or?
I know, I'm just trying to work out what, because this is about having a specialist area for mining. And giving them the ability to do quarrying, and I'm just trying to work out what this operational need within wetlands, what that actually means. Is that the wetlands in a road, because they just give them the ability to dig it up?
If it makes sense from a logistical point of view, like if this site has benefits, like significant benefits in terms of cost, like it's much more profitable to have it there, or logistical, like because it's located close to an arterial route, that would allow you to consider these things when you consent.
So what's the difference between operational need and functional need?
I think the functional need is it can only occur there. Sorry, the words in my head, but
No, you're right. Yeah.
Because of
Whereas operational need is it needs to be located or operated in a specific environment due to technical, logistical, or operational factors. So it's like Tom said, it's like it's not necessarily that it must occur there. Whereas so a functional need for a mine is obviously you have to mine in a place where there are minerals. Whereas you might have an operational need to have the processing thing right next to it because that's more efficient from a logistical or technical need. But it doesn't, technically, functionally, it doesn't need to be there, but operationally, it doesn't make sense otherwise.
So around this is not the only test going with this. We've still got all the environmental tests, haven't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that right?
It's a gateway test.
Yeah.
It's a gateway. So a gateway
Yeah,
test
yeah.
means that you can apply for a consent under a specific activity
Yeah.
status.
Yeah, then you've got to
Yeah.
either you do your mitigation or what offsetting or,
You got your mitigator or avoid or whatever,
yeah.
well, what's practical extent or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, on the sensitivity of the area.
Lloyd, I've got a definition of functional need. It means the need for a proposal or activity to traverse, locate, or operate in a particular environment because the activity can only occur in that environment. Yeah.
That's why I'm just pretty protective of my wetlands.
Yeah.
But there's already got some protections in behind you, to say this is just, it's just really a different door that's going through to get to them, to manage them, I guess. Andrew,
Yeah, just on that point, yeah, the gateway test may be offset by, as Kevin just said, mitigation. So it may be like compensation by way of building another wetland.
Yeah.
2 k's down the road where the mineral doesn't sit
Mm.
or the aggregate doesn't sit. You can't show the aggregate and the mineral, but you can offset the loss of a wetland with a new wetland that might be bigger
yeah,
and more environmentally beneficial.
Yeah.
I'm supportive of these. I think it's important to remember that when it comes to minerals and aggregate, I mean, it's a pretty big economic drivers, not only in Otago, but aggregate. For example, I think something like 70 tonnes per man, woman and child is required in New Zealand on an annual basis. You know, most of that goes into construction and road building and God knows whatever else, but it's a huge amount that's required, and it's getting harder and harder for new quarries to be established simply because of urban creep and reverse sensitivity issues and all the rest of it. So I'm supportive of the enabling, but obviously you need to have a close look at whatever operation and minimise the effects through a consent process, which is fair enough.
yeah, happy enough. We ready to move on? I'm probably happy with the terminology, getting them all together in the one. I am just a little bit nervous on the more enabling part. But in saying that, we have to be realistic about what we need and what we use. Yeah, and where we get it from, I guess. So we'll move on to resource management stock exclusion regulations.
So this is the last substantive topic, you'll be pleased to know. And it's quite a narrow proposal that's changing. So essentially it's removing the requirement for non-intensively grazed cattle to be excluded from wetlands. And I hope I got all the negatives around the right way, but essentially to allow for non-intensively grazed cattle and deer to graze in natural wetlands. Extensive grazing. So sorry, hopefully I haven't confused everyone about what the proposal actually is just there. Just a reminder of where we got to in the draft land and water plan. Essentially, the proposal was largely consistent with the national regulations, but I will just note that they've since been amended to remove the low slope land maps and the additional exclusion of heavy livestock from wetlands. I think that just repeats that, but the point is to provide a freshwater farm plan pathway as well. So that was that. Our thoughts on this are that there are situations where some wetlands can benefit from light grazing, so this non-intensive grazing. We would say that in terms of where stock access occurs, probably makes sense to consider that at the local level rather than a national blanket kind of approach. Yeah, and generally would suggest that there'd be support for the proposal as long as you can still manage particularly those regional plans. But that's just our thoughts. I don't want to hear yours.
Tim was before.
Tim, then Kate.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I don't really have too much of a problem with this, except where, well, if where stock is currently excluded from wetlands by existing fencing, I wouldn't like to think that the fences will be torn down and there's a free for all and the stock can just go into a wetland area now because of this. So you got any comments on that?
Yeah,
That would be the practical
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it could potentially happen. I'm not sure if people would do that, but there would be nothing stopping them from doing that if in this situation, if they've got extensive.
Yeah, is there some sort of provision perhaps that would allow for existing fences to continue to be there and access to be for those cattle to remain prohibited?
I think what it's trying to get at, what it's trying to say to us in the non-intensive farmed area, it's pretty expensive to be fencing off your wetlands.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
if there's a fence,
that does. Yeah,
Maybe
I
there's
mean, I'm not saying that you have to fence off those wetlands. I'm just saying where there is existing fencing, that it remains basically.
But where there is existing fencing, it's just as expensive to maintain it and continue with it. The practicality of maintaining some of the least intensively raised areas of
yeah.
It's just, that's just probably from experience, I guess, because the fences around wetlands, they tend to fall down really easily.
The other comment there, Tim, is the practicality of us knowing where every fence in the region is at the moment means that introducing that rule and expecting councils to then monitor and enforce it just has significant practical issues. I think, my sense in reality, having seen many and talking to people, is that there wouldn't be many people that would go and remove sections of fencing based on this rule, because there's not much that has been installed as a result of the NES, because it's always been up for discussion since it was brought in under the NES package. So I don't think we're talking about a significant amount of land anyway. In saying that, again, this is about listening and then the staff sort of capturing the general discussion, but my sense is that's not an issue we would face in reality. And if we pitched for something that tried to hold the status quo where fences existed, we wouldn't actually be able to enforce that in reality anyway, because we don't have a record of every fence.
Okay, well, I guess some sort of voluntary compliance or something along the lines. I don't know, but yeah, and I understand this. I understand the issues, but all I am thinking is that if we expose stock to natural wetlands, in some situations it could be damaging. So, and that's what we want to try and avoid. So, yeah.
Yeah, Andrew just mentioned farm plans, which is where it would sit.
Yes. Yeah.
Non-regulatory commitments to managing things in the right way.
Catchment action plans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No. Happy with
And more importantly, if you had invested in putting the fence there, it means that you can intensively farm the paddock now, and that would be where the gains would be, and therefore they wouldn't take it out. So it just makes absolutely sense. And look, I'm absolutely delighted to see in the report that they picked up on the high country, and the terrible things that it was putting those people through. So I'm really, really happy with this. The other thing I want to point out, and why this has annoyed so many people, is the amount of wetlands which have access for pigs, deer, goats, everything else in our wilderness areas, and how unfair that was. And that just means the focus really should be on pest management, and getting better tools for pest management generally is the issue.
So just, I guess, confirming that this is specifically around wetlands that are supporting threatened species. And I'm wondering if there's any backstop beyond that for like critically endangered species, if there were any
I don't know the answer.
you know, some plant that's critically endangered from getting trampled or something.
Proactive ecosystem services and eco fund money. The better answer.
So non-regulatory,
But
What about-
there are no.
So the discussion we had last week, when
Yeah.
we talked about thresholds, is there's still the ability for council to map it as a regionally significant wetland and create rules. This is the default rule. So
there is
there is still the ability for us to impose where there is justification through that classification system. This just removes that default setting.
Yeah, just because there's other areas where they're removing our ability to create those roles and maybe emphasizing
Yeah,
that it's important we do keep those. Yeah. which
so
is
that
already-
was, yeah, that was our third bullet point there, but yeah, if you're supportive of that, that's, yeah, that's helpful to know, yeah.
So,
Gary's
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 not
here.
here.
Gary, we'll go to you, Gary.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, totally support this. I think it's practical in the extensive environment. The footprint is light. Cattle will do. They're a tool for managing growth. Deer are a light footprint, and two, when it comes to those that have fenced, I'd say the only likelihood for them to be taking their fences out is because they've put their fences up thinking they were doing something good, and then they've found they've actually had unintended consequences where the wetland is now actually worse from it, whether it's weeds or whatever that the extensive animals were controlling. So we definitely wouldn't want any control those people to be able to get back to what was sound management of their wetland prior. So no, fully support. Thanks.
No. You know.
No, I'm just going with that to see. I've got notes on another couple of pages. We get
Just
started.
just on the Apatari scroll, I remember there was some research done by a lady, maybe
Richard.
from Waikato University, you'll remember, about the ability to lightly graze wetlands where there's obviously a benefit. Like, there is some science that backs up.
Yeah.
what's being.
I think the key to this is the definition of non-intensive. Because that's completely up for grabs, so it has to be quite clear what that definition is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's got to be less than 5 cows to hectare, Lloyd.
Oh, no.
So the way that this works is that intensively grazed is, or intensive grazing or some words like that, is defined in the stock
that the six
exclusion
stock-
regs.
Six documents.
That's not how, have you got the definition?
I've got a definition, oh no, sorry. Got a definition of intensive winter grazing, not
Oh.
intensive.
Is it? No, that's, is it the? units?
NES
Oh,
freshwater.
yeah, no, it's in the stock exclusion regs.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, okay. Maybe while Tom's finding that, we could just move on to the last little bit.
Can I just ask on that stock one, so the 20 stock exclusion, all the other stock exclusion 2020s still stay in place, which is like the 3 meters setback and low slope land or
Low slope's gone.
Low slope's
intensive land,
gone, but
intensive managed land.
That means
yeah.
Except for waterways and wetlands.
Yeah.
you want the definition.
Yeah.
So break feeding or grazing on annual forage crops or grazing on pasture that has been irrigated with water in the previous 12 months.
Oh, the irrigation one isn't right.
But they're not consulting on the stock exclusion regs.
Yeah,
So that's the definition.
it's the definition of.
Intensively grazing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're doing it, that's an expert's opinion.
Okay,
Okay.
I didn't quite get that.
If it rains, it's okay, but if it's irrigated, it isn't. The definition of wetland becomes really moot then, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's an induced wetland, is it?
Only irrigated with water. Some RO in it.
So just.
I think we,
Green
when you're
light,
doing that
you
one,
do
can we
photos
mention the freshwater farm plan somewhere along the line?
On the stock exclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, yeah, that
Yeah.
isn't, yeah.
You got it. Thank you. So we're moving on to the implementation options.
The last thing here, so just so you're aware, the current requirement is that, no, never mind, it's not what I need to say. For the National Environmental Standard, those changes will have immediate effect once these proposals are made into the new standards. For the National Policy Statements, they've got given some options for implementation and want some thoughts on that. So option 1 is as soon as practicable, which is essentially what the kind of like what the default is, I guess. Option 2 is to provide a 5-year implementation timeframe. And the third option is to require plan changes to fully implement each NPS before or at plan review, which is kind of fine, except that given that they're intending to have a whole new regime, I guess option 2 and 3 essentially means wait for the new system to implement the NPSs. Yeah, which, I mean, that's just what they're doing.
Can you do one without knowing what 2 and 3 are?
Do you mean, can you do option 1 as soon as practical?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, even as soon as practicable is a little difficult to know how you would do that. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Our thoughts on this is actually that where possible, we would like the government to say what changes they want to be made by what's called a direct insertion. So that's where you can make changes to a plan without a Schedule 1 process. If you want changes to plans to happen, can you just tell us what you want them to say? So that rather than having to go through an entire plan change process. And then
16 councils doing it. Multiply that by 16 regional councils doing it. It's not efficient.
It's crazy. And so, yeah, and I guess where they can't do that for whatever reason, our suggestion is that you should align the timeframes with the new system. And I've said possibly that means 2 or 3. It's a bit unclear, but probably doesn't matter that much. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to test levels of comfort with that as a proposal.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of like land water plan, the messaging was wait until that makes sense based on eminent stuff. So I think that's probably what you're saying there with that second bullet point as well. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kerry. We've got your message there. I think I agree with what you said. I think if they're going to go early, it needs to be a national directive or whatever you said in a direction insertion. And other than that, we just got to play the game to the end. I'm not opposed to it being nationally inserted because some of the stuff I'm not like at the end up. That's the rule. From my point, the sooner we start playing to the rule, the better. But if it's not a rule that's implemented from the national level, don't want to be a part of being left out in the cold sometime down the future. Yeah, it's spending a whole lot of money, 16 councils to achieve the same thing.
It's the most cost-effective way, but it also puts greater emphasis and pressure, I think, on regional councils to ensure that the non-REIT stuff gets plenty of attention in this period of.
I think you're probably right. If that was to go, that would send a clear indication to regional councils as well to start moving down those other avenues, of environmental management. Do we have any other discussions around that? I mean, everybody seems pretty happy with, your take on that one,
Awesome.
Claire and Tom.
Great, thank you very much for all your engagement and input. It's been really helpful for us and I'm hopeful. Oh, we do have time if anyone wants to go through the notes or the points that I sent round from the freshwater and housing growth conversations, or if everyone is a bit tired, like it might be the case, happy to receive those separately.
Just feedback through.
Yeah.
Kevin just mentioned those outside, he was fine with them, but I said he can always.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, so the next steps really is for us, we'll do the same kind of thing for these two packages today. And then we'll turn them into a written submission, which will then come to council on the 23rd.
So, that's in two. So you'll have your written submission, your draft written submission done prior to the next council meeting?
Certainly for the first three packages,
Yeah,
and we'll
and the
have
housing.
one for each. We're gonna try to do it for the fourth as well, but I just don't want to promise that right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Following the question that I got from Vicky at the meeting the other day, where is the regional sector response to these submissions at?
Yeah, good question. They are working on a draft submission across, submissions, I should say, across the four packages. I don't know, Richard, if you've seen anything yet. No, I don't think I've seen anything either.
So the reason I'm asking this question is partly because Vicky asked me, but where do we feed in as a regional sector into saying to what they're putting in as well? I mean, they're presumably doing a submission, and where does our feedback saying these are areas that we're going to be very, very different from Christ Canterbury or very different from Horowhenua?
So
I think effectively we'll use what we have taken over these last two sessions as a guide for any feedback we give on the sector submission. And then in the past where there's been a difference of opinion, that's made clear in the sector submission where it'll say
great,
not all councils or difference of opinion in these things. And then like our two, there's some technical stuff that is fed through by the SIDS of the submission, which just is provided as part of that submission as expert staff advice on some of the questions, similar to what we ran through last week.
Yeah.
In terms of some of those things that are considered more technical matters that staff provide comment on. So I'm just trying to remember the update from the end of last week, because it's still being worked on, so there is no draft at the moment. And then we still get the chance to provide comment on it, and we can use what we've picked up over the last two sessions for that as well.
I mean, if you're comfortable, I can send the notes from the last session to the sector, so then
absolutely. I think it's absolutely important that we do that. We show the points that we think we're quite, especially the areas where we think we can't do a response regionally, because that we will be quite bespoke. Yeah. When I look at all of the work that every regional council just presenting this information to the council laws must be reiterated and done differently and everything. It's a lot of work. It's almost at that point we should have been working more collaboratively to say, how do we present this as,
So we did share our slides. We were one of the first councils for block, so we did share our slides with the rest of the sector, and they have used them.
Right.
And yes, just following up on last time, there was some questions about our TA submission, particularly on the Going for Housing Growth one, and I have asked if we can see those. They're still working through themselves about exactly what the implications are, but as soon as I can, I'll share that as well. Yeah.
The only other comment, and I know that I did mention it last week, but if we, in redoing all of this and the RMA, if you got a system that is more collaborative and where there are issues, we can raise them and say how, I think the system has become so adversarial that we actually have to look at a different way of addressing, both when it comes to writing plans and, you know, seeing the costs of some of the, even just doing the RPS, just ridiculously large, the cost of those sort of things, as submitters and doing the mediation. I think I heard one party to that, which I think got a better plan, cost 150,000 in legal fees alone, let alone their time doing it. Anyway, that I think we need to be looking at how the structures in the less adversarial models, which work better in mediation than it would have in the environment court by a long shot, can be utilised and be the requirement. And evidence is tabled at the first hearing, not the last.
Well, got any other comments? If not, I think we'll just close the session off. So, Claire and Tom, thank you very much for your time, and Anita for the first half. So thank you. Well, it's been you know, what have we had? 8 or 9 hours on the saddle. So it's been, you know, pretty decent sort of a discussion on this. So hopefully you've got feedback that you need, and pretty much I'd just like to thank everybody around the table or everybody contributing as well. And so it's really good that we've achieved that, and we look forward to your draft submission in a week. So the next time we meet, I believe, will be
Give me 2 weeks.
well, the next time we meet is going to be, I think, in like 2 weeks and 1 day in Oamaru. So that'll be, we'll look forward to meeting up with everybody then for the council meeting. So thank you very much. Cora, remember, life is precious. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The interesting one that I understand is coming through from some of the industry groups is that the PAPs be part non-regulatory and part regulatory, which I know is going to blow some catchment goods away. And yeah, we need to keep them separate.
But the cap is still, yeah, the cap is still